start with the instruction reminders?
Well, I think what we'll do first is we'll call the meeting to order and welcome everybody as we do our second remote meeting, and thank you all for attending. I'm hopeful this one goes as well as the last one did, and we're going to try to optimize that by having Adam now give us a set of instructions to follow. So please, everyone in the audience and all board members, pay close attention.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, board members and members of the public for joining today's meeting. I will give a very brief overview of instructions today's meeting. Please be sure to mute your microphones or phones if you are calling in, and please turn off your video. Board members, if you wish to make a comment on any of the agenda items, please physically raise your hand so that we could see you on your Zoom video. Or if you are by phone, I don't think anyone is by phone, just speak up during the comments and discussion when Chair Penner calls for it. Today's voting will be by roll call only. At the end of each agenda item that requires a vote, I will call the roll. Board members who need to recuse, please mute your microphone and turn off your video during the discussion of that agenda item. You will have to unmute your microphone and turn your camera back on when we have finished the item discussion and vote. You do not need to hang up the call or leave the meeting. To the members of the public, we will give the members of the public the opportunity to comment after each agenda item, including the informational updates about COVID-19 and the CSF at the beginning of the meeting. You will have 2 minutes for comments. Participants who wish to make public comment, please email Tracy Komen at tracie.cone@bscc.ca.gov. This information is also available on our website if you need it. You could also use the Zoom chat feature to make your public comments. This information is available on the homepage, as I said. If you are connecting by phone, please include your name and phone number so that we can call on you by name during the public comment. Remember, for those who are on the phone, to mute and unmute your phone by dialing *6. Madam Chair, that concludes my instructions.
Thank you, Adam. Will you begin with the roll call, please?
Yes. All right, Chair Penner.
Present.
Mr. Diaz is absent today. Mr. Green?
Here.
Mr. Groudon?
Here.
Mr. Gore?
Here.
Mr. Steele?
Is that me? I'm here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Ortola?
Here.
Mr. Barranco?
Here.
Mr. Mills?
Present.
Mr. Budnick?
Here.
Mr. Steinhardt? Mr. Steinhardt?
Present.
Okay, now I'm unmuted and here.
And Ms. Kumbion?
Here.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum.
Great, great. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and do the chair's remarks and reports out of order today because I think it's such a important conversation that we're having today about many, many subject matters. But first and foremost, I think we have to acknowledge what's going on across the country and in our communities and actually across the world in terms of the killing of George Floyd and the nationwide reaction. And I want to say that I'm proud to be part of a state that has acknowledged that pain, and our governor has stepped up and announced his support for criminal justice reforms. And while the BSCC has a small role in that, I want you to know that we have already begun responding to issues and initiatives that are coming out of what we face today. As you may or may not know, the governor ordered posts to suspend training of carotid holds, and we quickly looked at what was in our training curriculum that would relate to that. And we have begun ourselves suspending training and looking case by case as to what's going on out there to comport with what the governor has asked and ordered. As you may know, our STC division has to do with correctional officers and probation officers. And so we know that it is important for us to take this important step to begin all of the healing that we need as a result of what's going on out in our communities today. I anticipate there'll be a number of you out there today that want to make public comments on many, many subject matters, and we will ensure that you get that opportunity. We're going to begin the meeting with some information items. First and foremost, we know that people are very interested in the COVID-19 update. So I'm going to ask Katie to take that subject matter on, and we will discuss the adult facilities, the juvenile facilities, and inspections, training, compliance, and grants, all that have to do with COVID. And then we will pause and ask for public comment. And as Adam said, you need to email Tracy Komen, and there'll be a 2-minute time limit on those who are in the queue to speak. So I'll ask you, Katie, to take it from here.
Thank you very much. Good morning, Madam Chair and members of the board. And I appreciate everyone being here for what I know are some important conversations today. And I look forward to helping our board advance justice in California. On the COVID-19 updates, one thing I want to mention, this just a little bit more by way of instruction. If you have the board materials up on your computer, this is all loaded dynamically. And for example, I'm going to make reference to a letter we received in connection with the coronavirus emergency supplemental funding. If you hover your mouse over information item 3, executive director's report, you'll see an opportunity to click. And you can link to the letter that way. And then as we move through the agenda, you can click back to the agenda page and then move around that way. I just wanted to offer that little bit of logistical instruction. So on the COVID-19 related updates by division here at the BSCC, we have, since the beginning of working in place orders and all the rest, we've been putting a whole lot of information on the BSCC website by division. And I'd like to start with our STC training division to let you know how that part of the BSCC work is being handled. Normally, we would be doing on-site compliance reviews during this time of the year. But because of the shelter in place and working from home arrangements that we have, we're conducting virtual reviews on STC compliance. And we're bringing in as much flexibility as we can to use electronic records and meet on video conference and so forth. In addition, STC related, we have extended the deadline for the use of the funds that are available for mental health training. This was funding we were able to identify from the JAG program, and that can now be used through September 30th, 2021 to give agencies an additional year to deliver training or find online training alternatives on mental health issues. And this was the $7 million that we were able to allocate out to the state for behavioral health training for law enforcement agencies. In terms of facility inspections, our FSO division, Allison Ganter will be giving a substantive report later on our agenda. So I just want to give a couple of updates here to say that the FSO team has, similar to STC, been in constant contact with facilities and checking in remotely, not at the present time able to go out to the field directly, but we are in regular contact and communicating with the facilities on suspension of regulations. Chair Penner reviews those suspensions every other week. They're only renewed for 15-day increments. And what we have begun to notice in the recent weeks is that some facilities are ending some of the suspensions as their counties have begun to get into reopening. So in certain counties, I think Sheriff Groudon's is one of them, there's been a resumption of in-person visitation. Other counties are able to have people come in to deliver programming or educational programs. We have, in addition, collected information on policy and practice changes around intake and release in our juvenile detention facilities across the state, and we're providing regular updates about changes in population, as well as the numbers of intake and releases at the county jails and juvenile detention facilities. As for our grants division, the CPGP division, I wanted to let you know that the CPGP is using emergency site visit procedures to support remote monitoring of our many grant programs. We have information available on our website about that. When we met in April at our first Zoom meeting, the board delegated temporary authority to staff to approve COVID-19 related changes in grant service delivery. And some of those that we have been able to approve and work with our grantees on are things like budget modifications to purchase laptops and other technology resources, to postpone in-person service delivery, to modify curricula or service delivery methods, and even to purchase food for clients who have food insecurity issues. On the next major COVID-19 related item, we want to provide an update on the federal coronavirus emergency supplemental funding, which is also known as CESF. So to begin with, I'm going to ask Ricardo Goodrich, our Deputy Director of CPGP, to provide a status report. Ricardo?
Thank you, and good morning, Madam Chair and board members. Again, Ricardo Goodrich with the CPGP division, and appreciate this opportunity to update the board. The Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, also known as the CARES Act, made approximately $850 million in federal money available under the Coronavirus Emergency Supplemental Funding Program, or CESF. Now, CESF was allocated based on a formula allocation that was used for the Burn JAG grant program. Of that $850 million, approximately $93.6 million is coming to California. 58.5 specifically is available to the state, and 35.1 million is available to local governments through a separate application process that does not include the BSCC. Now, CESF provides funding to states, local units of government, and tribes to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. Allowable projects and purchases include, and again, this is not an exhaustive list, but overtime equipment, including law and medical personal protective equipment, hiring supplies such as gloves, masks, sanitizer, training, and different things to address the medical needs of inmates in state, local, and tribal prisons, jails, and detention centers. Now, on May 13th, the BSCC applied for the $58.5 million in CSF that it was eligible for, and that application was subsequently approved 3 days later on the 16th. The application package included terms and conditions that were at issue of the ongoing Burn JAG litigation. Consequently, our general counsel has been working with Cal DOJ to obtain a modified order to cover the CESF so that we can accept the award. And we have been moving rather swiftly to complete all the steps that are included in that process. In the interim, we have received significant interest from the public regarding CESF availability. At least 70 inquiries have been received from CBOs, state and local law enforcement, tribes, courts, as well as cities. We should also point out that a signed letter was also received by Assembly members Shirley Weber, Mark Stone, and Reggie Jones Sawyer. And that letter can be found in Information Item 3, which is the Executive Director's Report. Again, that's Information Item 3, the Executive Director's Report. We appreciate the many inquiries that have come in and welcome the public's feedback as we consider CESF priority areas. To streamline the submission process, we have created a dedicated email inbox and will institute a 30-day public comment period. We ask the public to please submit comments and our priority recommendations to cesfinput@bscc.ca.gov. Again, that's cesfinput, all one word, at bscc.ca.gov. And we will accept public comments beginning tomorrow, the 12th, through July 12th. And obviously, we'll share those results with the board at the September board meeting. And at this point, I'll just pause to see if there are any questions from the board.
Madam Chair, I wanted to add thank you so much, Ricardo. Really
Absolutely.
appreciate the status report and all the work that has gone into securing this important funding source to date. We have been in touch with the Governor's Office and the Department of Finance in an effort to streamline the coordination at the state level for the variety of federal funding sources that are coming into California. And we know that it's important to receive public comment from any and all of our stakeholders who can share their sense of what the priority needs are for this funding. And in addition, the state is really interested in ensuring that the funding is leveraged in the most advantageous way for our state as possible. Just as one example, we're understanding from Department of Finance that PPE or personal protective equipment can be purchased through FEMA with FEMA covering 75% of the costs. So it may make more sense for FEMA dollars to be used for that. That's one of the reasons we've wanted to take more time and collect information about what the needs are and what the best way financially to meet those needs are for the state of California. So we do plan to bring a recommendation to the board about how to allocate out the $58.5 million at the state level when this board meets again in September, following the analysis of the public comment that is received. And we did put that email address in the Zoom chat for those of you who can see it that way. And we'll issue a release and information on this after the board meeting. So with that, Madam Chair, we're ready for public comment on this part of the information agenda about COVID-19 related updates.
I think we have two people, Madam Chair, who want to speak on this, Elizabeth Gladstone and Renee Menard.
Elizabeth,
Hi there, can you hear me?
we can.
Great, thanks. My name is Elizabeth Gladstone and I'm an attorney at the National Center for Youth Law. As part of the Release and Reconnect Coalition that we're a part of, we conducted a survey a few weeks ago for youth, parents, attorneys, and community-based organizations and received over 200 responses. And that survey was sought to find information about how youth are experiencing COVID-19 and being in juvenile facilities. And those survey responses included some youth reporting having no outside recreational activity, some youth being in their cells for over 4 hours, and some youth concerned about the lack of consistent social distancing, which shows both that BSCC must revamp its inspections process to ask youth and families of their experiences and plan how to do in-person inspections as soon as possible, as soon as it's safe to do so, to address these serious oversight failures. And also, these survey responses have shown that BSCC must serve as a centralized public database for these COVID cases and conditions and concerns inside local facilities so that the public may be made aware of the varying conditions over all 58 counties. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy? Oh, Renee. Is it Renee?
I think so.
Renee's
Yes,
next?
hi. Can you hear me?
There, Renee.
Hi, Renee Menard with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. Good morning to the board and the BSCC staff. I would also like to speak briefly about the need for additional protections and public information on local facilities amid the COVID-19 outbreak. I understand the BSCC staff has been working towards maintaining safe conditions within these facilities, but as Ellie mentioned, both on the juvenile side and in adult facilities, we have major concerns about what's happening inside. Not only are we hearing in the media and from folks inside the facilities about issues with outbreaks and the COVID-19 cases inside and the fear it invokes in families, but we also have concerns about the conditions more generally. So I would also, again, ask that the board consider expanding the data that it already collects on local facilities to include the COVID-19 cases. Advocates have previously called on the BSCC to track these cases in county facilities because no other state facility is providing that information. Advocates and family members across the state are forced to take to local means to try and get this information, and it's not working. So we are asking that the BSCC, again, please take action to track COVID-19 cases in these facilities and further serve as a clearinghouse for COVID-19 related issues that come to be. Members of the public can serve as a source of insight, and we need to be hearing about this outside of media coverage that comes every now and then. So I would ask that the board, again, consider tracking COVID-19 cases and serving as a clearinghouse for the public on these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Renee.
I feel like there's a little bit of confusion that some people might think that I'm getting a lot of emails right now that this is the COVID-19 discussion when this is the BJA. We were commenting specifically.
This is COVID generally.
This is
COVID generally, and we have a lot of people for COVID
Okay.
generally. Okay. Okay, then let's go with Miguel Garcia.
And as you do that, Tracy, can you tell me what you define as a lot? And
It looks like we have a dozen.
okay, and of course we'll try to honor all 12 that we have now, but we'll at some point have to cut off the public comment on this portion. So moving down the list.
Okay, Miguel Garcia.
Thank you. Good morning, Madam Chair and board members. My name is Miguel Garcia, Policy Coordinator with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. As someone who is formerly incarcerated, I know up too well the conditions of the facilities which house California youth and adults. And during this COVID outbreak, serious concerns have been brought to light because of media attention and lack of sheriff accountability. It has already been reported by the LA Times, Press Enterprise, and other media outlets that lives have been lost that stem from county correctional facility, which include those who were incarcerated and those who were employed. Still, there is little to no transparency from sheriff departments across the state, which is frustrating, as other states such as Texas and the Texas Commission on Jail Standards, an agency equivalent to the BSCC, collects data from each county that specifies COVID-related information. The BSCC should require the same transparency from our local counties. This agency already has the infrastructure to collect COVID-19 data, since it's already responsible for regularly collecting and analyzing local trends, including county facility population. By collecting this type of data from local detention facilities, our public health sector will be better informed on how to handle this pandemic, which currently seems to be getting worse with rising numbers across the state. I would also like to remind you that there are human beings behind those walls, and to say that because they are in jail, they are no longer part of the community is wrong. Thank you, and I urge your support.
Thank you.
We have Avalon Edwards. He's the public policy fellow for Starting Over. He has a comment and he wants to read a statement from somebody else, and I'm going to leave that to you, Madam Chair.
Well, I think it can all happen if it's within our 2-minute time limit. We have quite a line forming, and I would urge everyone who wants to speak on this matter to make sure you're in the queue now.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Mm-hmm.
So the statement I have to read was from somebody who intended to be here but wasn't available to come to this meeting this morning. So I have my own statement and hers as well.
Okay.
So may I have 2 minutes for my statement?
I think that's only fair. 2 and 2. That's perfect.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it. My name is Avalon Edwards, and I'm a policy fellow with Starting Over, Inc., which provides reentry services and transitional housing support for those returning home from incarceration and experiencing homelessness in the Greater Inland Empire region. Sheriff's departments, like all law enforcement, claim to protect and serve the communities they work with. Unfortunately, this is not the case in Riverside County, and the consequence has been fatal. I'd like to read you a few quotes from Riverside County Sheriff Chad Bianco from April of this year. "If you don't want to contract this virus while in custody, don't break the law. You can't get any more plain than that. We are not considering this any type of a jail emergency that we are not handling. We believe that we have this contained at the moment. There is no such thing as a low-level inmate in our custody. We don't hold them anyway." End quote. The reality is that approximately 60% of those in Riverside County jails are there because they're too poor to afford bail. Among the over 3,000 individuals in Riverside County jails today, there are people who are over the age of 50 and who are otherwise medically vulnerable. But Chad Bianco maintains that those in his custody essentially deserve to get infected with COVID-19 as an aspect of their punishment. Bianco's department has not provided adequate personal protective equipment, social distancing measures, or treatment for COVID-positive individuals. The result has been the death of at least 4 individuals and the rapid spread of COVID-19 to over 240 people throughout the county's jails. Family members of those incarcerated in Bianco's jails are being lied to and left in the dark about the health of their loved ones. Because of his apathy, it is essential that the BSCC mandate the collection and centralization of jail data on COVID-19. It is the job of the BSCC to demand transparency and accountability from California sheriffs when they refuse to do so themselves. This is a matter of life and death. Thank you for your time. And then I will go ahead and read this statement from Miss Lenora Taylor, whose son-in-law contracted COVID-19 within a Riverside County jail. My son-in-law, Willie, was incarcerated at the Banning jail when he got sick with coronavirus. He found out on April 15th that he had the virus. He ended up in a hospital and we didn't know where he was for almost 3 weeks. After he came out of an induced coma, they transferred him to a ward where they keep inmates at Moreno Valley Hospital. They were supposed to keep him for 2 weeks to make sure he didn't have the virus. But as soon as he got there, they transferred him to the Riverside jail and put him in a holding tank straight out of the hospital. They kept him there for 4 days and 3 nights. There was no place for him to lie down and for those 3 nights, and he was around other people in the tank. Then they took him up to the medical floor at Riverside jail. This past weekend, they took him out of the medical ward and transferred him to the Southwest jail where they had him in another holding tank for a day. Now he's back in the Riverside jail in the same bed that they took him from when he was sick. He could barely talk when he first got the virus. When he came out of the hospital, he was talking strong, but now he can barely talk again. Before Willie got sick, he would call me 4 or 5 times a day. Now at most, he might be able to call 2 times a day. They're punishing inmates for the protests, even though they have nothing to do with them. Now they have to eat breakfast at 3 a.m., lunch at 11 a.m., and dinner at 3 p.m. That's 12 hours with nothing to eat. Willie can't take his medicine for high blood pressure and diabetes on an empty stomach. During the protests, I put money on his books for commissary so he could eat something before taking his medicine. I had to contact an attorney at the NAACP to make sure they would let him access that money. I can't even say that they're being treated like animals because they're being treated worse than animals. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jordana Wong Omshihi of Starting Over.
Yes, thank you. My name is Jordana Wongum Shehi, and I'm the Public Policy Associate for Starting Over, Inc. I too want to lift up what's happening in Riverside County, particularly because Chad Bianco has taken such a hard stance against providing any sort of data publicly for families and for advocates and for attorneys. I do want to thank you guys for the work that you're actively doing to respond to COVID-19, but I also want to express the concerns due to the lack of centralization around COVID-19 facility data. Riverside County Sheriff's Department has refused to provide transparency around data and COVID cases inside of Riverside correctional facilities. To date, per the Riverside Public Health website, there are 242 confirmed cases inside the jails and 377 in prisons. But these numbers could not be accurate because the media recently reported this week, and I quote, what seems to be the worst coronavirus outbreak to hit California's prison system, with nearly 1,000 people inside Chickasaw Valley State Prison testing positive for COVID-19 just this week. Community members have been publicly mocked by the sheriff in response to our calls for early release and transparency around data, as you heard from Avalon. And our questions are, when are numbers being reported? What facilities are the positive cases at? Who is being most impacted by the spread of the virus? What is the plan for people being released? Are they being tested and quarantined prior to release? Are they being tested and quarantined prior to transfer? We know that people have been being transferred from the Indio facility since April. There's currently no statewide resources that centralize county COVID-19 facility data, which is critical to understand the scope of the pandemic. The BSCC is already responsible for collecting and analyzing local trends, including county facility populations, and has the infrastructure to collect COVID-19 data. We call on you to create more transparency through the centralization of this. Thank you.
Thank you.
Desiree Mendez.
Hi, good morning.
Morning.
My name is Desiree Mendez. I'm from Riverside County. My brother is currently incarcerated in Riverside County. I just wanted to voice and share some insight on what's being shared with me on the conditions inside the jail. It's been brought to my attention that the trustees who are in charge of cleaning, sanitizing common areas are given practically water and a rag to clean. There's hardly no cleaning solution, mainly water. This is extremely concerning to me because there's already a large amount of people who are incarcerated and who are sick. I'm not understanding how they are providing a safe sanitary environment for these inmates and also to slow down the spread of COVID-19 or any other sickness. Also, it's been brought to my attention that inmates are sick, are left with general population, spreading the virus or sickness, whatever people may have. I understand that not everyone who gets sick in there has COVID-19, but because we're facing a pandemic, this is why it's so important for them to take serious caution measures that are necessary as told by the Riverside County. Another thing I would like to mention is face masks. Although the inmates are now, they have face masks now, and that's been provided to them. I've been told only one has been provided during this whole entire quarantine. Again, this is concerning and worries me about, I have worries and concerns about they're not being provided with proper PPE. The BSCC should serve as clearinghouse for the COVID-19 issues from the public and incarcerated individuals. The public relies on the BSCC as a centralized database for information and on conditions and concerns inside local facilities. We are very concerned about what's happening in these facilities and want to know how the BSCC has been tracking issues that have become apparent in the media. The BSCC must serve as a public database to track COVID-19 in the county facilities. This is currently no statewide resource that centralizes county COVID-19 facility data, which is critical to understand the scope of the pandemic to provide support to the people across California. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terrence Stewart, California State Director of the Time Done Project.
Are you there, Terrence? Are you on mute, maybe? Okay, let's move forward.
Let's do Dominique Nong of the Children's Defense Fund, and she's going to be coming from a 909 number if you want to patch her in.
Good morning. This is Dominique Nong from the Children's Defense Fund, California. I'd like to express support for the content of Dr. Weber's letter regarding the $58.6 million Bureau of Justice Assistance grant. And that letter urges the allocation plan to prioritize funding for essential community-rooted service providers for justice-involved people, survivors, and communities. These community-rooted providers are on the front lines, including in providing reentry services to the many individuals released from locked facilities. The funding guides also emphasize communities most impacted, and those communities often overlap with those with the highest justice system involvement in California. These funds can support an expansive range of activities, and I hope the BSCC considers looking to a model created by other states that have already committed to sub-granting to nonprofits. Earlier this week, the agency managing the grant for Illinois indicated an intention to spend 100% of the state's allocation to support transitional housing for people leaving prisons and on community-based organizations that serve communities highly impacted. Additionally, I would like to reinforce the ask for the BSCC to serve as a clearinghouse for COVID-19 issues, and that based on the many personal stories that you've heard, that the BSC staff prioritize investigating some of the concerns raised in Riverside County. Thank you.
Thank you.
Joseph Velasco, Fresno, Barrios Unidos.
Tracy, are you hearing any follow-up to these individuals that aren't able to hop on and make their remarks? Are you seeing any emails?
Not since they were, we had some problems at the beginning where people were not able to log on, and we fixed the link. He's also submitted a written comment, so I will make sure Adam gets that to all of you all then.
Okay. If you are in the queue and we call your name and you're not able to make contact for one reason or the other, please email Tracy directly so we can catch you down the line here. So we'll go next.
Brian Goldstein from CJCJ. I have him as my last speaker on this topic. So if I have missed somebody, send me a quick email and I'll get you back in the line.
Okay.
Or you can put up your request to comment in the chat if that's easier.
Yes. Adam, you're looking at those, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Brian?
Good morning, Brian Goldstein with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. In April, over 30 organizations submitted a letter requesting the governor instruct BSCC to collect COVID-19 testing data in jails and juvenile facilities. BSCC has the capacity to do this. You collect data on county facility populations, which includes medical information. Otherwise, there is currently no statewide resource that centralizes this information. The CDCR secretary knows at least 3,000 infections have happened in California's prisons. The California Department of Public Health director knows over 10,000 residents in skilled nursing facilities have COVID-19. So, can Board Chair Penner, as leading the state oversight agency for jails and juvenile facilities, provide the public today with any estimate of COVID-19 testing and infections? Will the board approve a motion on this issue to signal your willingness to collect and publish this critical information? Otherwise, how much longer will we have to wait before the governor and BSCC shows any interest in COVID-19 testing and protecting all Californians amid this pandemic? Thank you.
Thank you. I can assure you the governor's office is very interested, as is the BSCC. We are coordinating and have not failed to hear your request. We've pieced through this. Health directors are working very hard on collating this information, and I appreciate everybody's remarks today. They're noted. We'll continue these conversations and move right down the agenda, unless, Tracy, you have anybody that's re-upped.
I don't have anybody. I can't see the chat feature.
Is this the time where I could speak? I wasn't sure if that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. I was going to go to the board next, but
okay.
Started the ball rolling. Let's do that.
Well, listening to the members from the community speak today, I am also wondering why the county jails or the BSCC cannot produce these numbers of people being tested the same way that CDCR does. I'm wondering like what we can do to fix that. If it goes to the counties, the individual counties, because CDCR does it. I check it almost every day. It's great. Or do we ask if we can do that? If we have the capacity, if we don't have the capacity, can we request the capacity to do this? Because these are our community members. These are people who are suffering. We don't even know if they're getting tested or if they're keeping their distance, if they have masks, because we spoke about earlier that our inspections are not in person. And so I'm kind of not clear about why that is not happening either. About since in Los Angeles County, we're on phase 3 today. So I'm not sure why we can't go into the county jails. And lastly, I would like to know how the BSCC can be more involved in those inspections. I, for one, would love to participate in that. I would love to go. I'd love to participate. And I'm sure some of the other board members would also.
Yeah, I think I can partially answer some of your issues that you raise, and I absolutely understand some of the frustration out there. We have had this conversation about transparency and documentation of issues in jails and juvenile facilities regarding COVID from almost the moment this crisis occurred, and we have consulted with the administration, and they are very concerned about accurate reporting. And I think they are relying, I know they are relying on health directors. So if there is a positive test, that test must be submitted to the health director, and then the count for the state follows that. We actually had a number of conversations about how that is done. They have not wanted to have false reporting done, and if it's done based on self-reporting COVID cases to us jail by jail, I think there's a concern that there would be issues with accuracy. Now that's neither good or bad in my estimation, except that we're just honoring what the health directors are choosing to do in this instance. When you reference what CDCR is doing, it is a much different organization than what we see county by county throughout the state. They have one director. They have a whole research and reporting division that can work on this very issue as a statewide reporting requirement. The counties are different, and 58 counties are responding 58 different ways. We have sent out a number of advisories on how to stay within the regulation and to ensure that they're following the cleanliness guidelines and guidelines to prohibit as much as we can the spread of the virus. I know that sounds like government speak, but the state of California is not a state-run county jail system, and we honor that very issue. So I'm not sure that's satisfactory, Norma, to you right now, but I will additionally say this. Board members may go on any inspection they choose to go on. We have no issue with that occurring. We have field reps out all the time. We have an urgency also to get our field reps back out into the field, but we also have to adhere to what the state is advising us now in terms of what we do with our employees. We will look at, when is the best time we can do that, where it is safe for all involved. But it's very hard to give some concrete answers on when everything is going to occur, because it's been, a system in flux for a while.
Well, I just thank you very much for that. And you give a lot of clarity. But I just want to say that I think from what we've heard from the people today is they simply want transparency. And I think that the counties, even though there are 58 counties, there's someone in charge of those 58 counties. So someone in charge, they're already tracking some medical. I don't know exactly, but I think they are tracking some. And so of the 58, I think the person in charge, maybe they have the capacity to move on this. But I don't see how we can operate without that transparency of giving this to the people, that they're worried about their family and their loved ones. And we have to, as a community, start looking at people who are incarcerated as our community.
I don't disagree, Norma, and I think we can, often after a debrief of one of these meetings, we will go back, regroup, and begin more conversations with information that is discerned out of the board's concerns. That's the only thing I can assure you of right now. I don't want to say, oh yeah, we're going to begin to do this, because there's a number of conversations that have to go on. I do feel confident that the Sheriff's Association, the Chief Probation Officers of California are having these very same conversation. And I'd look to anyone on the board that would like to, address any of that. Scott, I know you're ready to speak next. I saw you raise your hand.
I mean, listen, I agree with everything that Norma's saying, and I listened to some of these comments from the Riverside County Sheriff that are deeply inhumane and insulting, and know that those types of comments aren't endorsed by people in the wider association. I know Sheriff Gore's heart and his care for those in his jails. But I also know that these associations are not 58 Sheriff Gores. And it's way more complex than that. I think we've had a cultural issue on this board after realignment that we are going to ask the counties to do a lot more. We're going to send them a lot of money, and then we're going to not make them very accountable for what they're doing with that money because we've asked them to inherit so much responsibility. And now we're having this conversation on the DJJ front. I think at some point we need to stop not having oversight. We need to stop not holding people accountable for bad behavior. And we need to pay attention to the bad actors. And we need to make sure that everything that's happening is transparent. There's no reason why this board should not force every county just to be transparent with data. There's no excuse for it.
And I think by virtue of this conversation, by virtue of what I hear as a strong desire by people on this board to move forward on those fronts, we'll take that, we'll note it, we'll move it. And I don't want you to think it has not been considered prior to this, but I hear you loud and clear, both of you, absolutely. I think Tracy has, anybody else from the board, I apologize. I'm not seeing hands raised. Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So I can only speak to what the Chief Probation Officers of California are doing. And since COVID has started, we have had weekly regional meetings to discuss how we can stay within the guidelines and make sure that we take care of the individuals that are in our care. Also for Nevada County, even though it's a smaller county, I do have weekly meetings with our sheriff, and we discuss exactly COVID and what we're doing and to stay within the guidelines again. And so we can communicate with each other and make sure that we're doing the best we can to care for those people. So just speaking on what we're actually doing. So thank you.
Yeah, I mean, and Scott, thank you, Mike. And I'm left unsaid by me that I want to say is I hear those conversations out of Riverside County, and I don't think there's a person on this board that in any way supports any of that. And so not also on deaf ears today. I just don't, we're not at a pivotal point where I can start directing people to go out and do things immediately, or we can commit to certain courses of action. But loud and clear, I'm going to say that once again. Anybody else?
Tracy had two more requests for comment, right?
We have two people that we called on who were having trouble logging in, and we can hear from them. And then I have three people who've weighed in who want to talk, but it was after you went to the board. So I'll leave that to you. But first we have Terrence Stewart and Ed Little. Let's start with Terrence Stewart.
Okay, and let me say this, Tracy. Okay. We'll do the 2 and the 3, and then we will close public comment on this area.
Okay, Terrence Stewart.
Hello.
Hi, Terrence.
Hello, my name is Terrence Stewart. I'm a statewide director of California for Safety and Justice, Time Done Project. And all I just want to say that, it's two things going on. Mainly, I think y'all highlighted it, and y'all pretty much understand that with the pandemic and the racial. I live out here in Riverside County, out here with the sheriff, and we dealing with this right now we'll be outside today still advocating for people to be released. And we're putting our lives on the line for that. So I just want to let y'all know that we're out here putting our life on the line to help people with past convictions, but can y'all, invest in projects that help people who are out here doing this type of work? Y'all done heard from me since Prop 47. I've been adamant of trying to put money into resources for people in the community. And I'm still echoing the same point I've been making since Prop 47. Let's continue to invest in our community. That's it.
And Edward Little.
Good morning, Chair and members of the board. My name is Ed Little, and I am from Californians for Safety and Justice. I'm a policy advocate with CFSJ. And as you know, California, through the BSCC, is receiving $58.6 million from the Federal Bureau of Justice Assistance through the CARES Act Congress passed in March. These funds can support an expansive range of activities to prevent, prepare for, and expand and respond to the coronavirus, and that may be implemented by nonprofit or government entities. At a time when California and the nation are confronting two deadly pandemics, the coronavirus and the entrenched crisis of racist violence, police killings, it is more crucial now than ever before that the BSCC leverage its resources to support communities of color most impacted by these issues. As the state distributes these federal stimulus dollars, it must not compound structural inequity and racial injustice by failing to prioritize essential community-based safety services, especially those rooted in Black and Latinx communities. California relies on a network of community-based organizations that provide essential services to justice-involved people, survivors, and communities most impacted by COVID-19. Our research has shown that 4 out of 5 crime survivor and reentry service providing organizations are experiencing real challenges right now with regard to resources, as well as some of them are forced to close their doors. 75% of these organizations have stopped providing services altogether. Meanwhile, in California, the number of people who were released from prison in January through April this year increased by 50% compared to the same period a year ago. Safe releases and diversion from jails and prisons in California continue to be essential in preventing the responding to COVID-19. California is relying on a dedicated but stretched network of frontline nonprofit service providers to provide reentry needs. We just ask that you utilize these resources to support these organizations in this critical time with what we're dealing with this pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, Chair Penner.
Yes.
Can I say one more thing? I didn't see my man, Sheriff Groudon over there, and I didn't mean to single out Sheriff Gore. Both unbelievable men, and I know personally from visiting Lassen County with formerly incarcerated folks that had lunch with you. I know these guys as leaders are on the same page. I know both Chief Ortola and Chief Seal and what they're doing for folks in their care. And I just, my hope is for folks in these associations, our 58 sheriffs, our 58 probation chiefs, that the folks that are in the same vein and see this as a human issue and not an us versus them issue, begin to speak up and make your voices louder than others in your associations who are in the minority but seem to have a very different point of view. But I just want to give a shout out to the 4 law enforcement leaders on this board. And I appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Scott.
David Guizar is in the queue.
Yes. Hello, good morning. My name is David Guizar, and Madam Chair and all the board, thank you so much for today. We were chatting you, so we couldn't get on cue, so we had to pivot and email you. But yes, very important for this coronavirus emergency supplemental funding to be accessed by the community groups that work every day in the front lines, to support people returning home. And the way we could do this is that BSCC has the duty to ensure that resources are distributed equitably to immediately provide targeted relief and address the root causes of health and social inequities. The BSCC must ensure community-based essential services providers are prioritized for all relevant funding and commit all of the CARES Act BGA funds to community-based organizations. We see examples of this already happening in Illinois. It indicated that's intention to spend 100% of the state's allocation to support transitional housing for people leaving prisons and on community-based organizations that serve communities highly impacted by COVID-19. Thank you so much, and please check your chat box. I'm sure there's others that want to comment.
Thank you, David.
I have Tino Rodriguez and then Luis Morales, and that's the 3 that you were going to let in after the deadline. The rest, I will keep your names, and you can speak at the end of the meeting during the general public comment.
Thank you, Tracy. Are we waiting?
We're waiting for Tino Rodriguez. She sent me multiple emails. Is Luis there? Luis Morales?
I wonder if Tina and Luis are in the chat room.
No, good morning. Good morning. I'm here. I'm sorry.
Okay.
It just took me a second to unmute myself.
Okay.
Yes, good morning. So, yeah, I would like to echo what's been said. My name is Luis Morales. I'm one of the chapter coordinators for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice, as well as an advocate for the Reverence Project here in Watts. And I would just like to echo the notion that it's imperative that we, invest our funds into, progressive and forward-thinking strategies that are already helping people in this time of crisis. Because again, I think that would work in alignment with what the vision of at least what folks are talking about, trying to, convey with their budget items and things like that. And again, people that are most impacted are the ones who need extra support, especially in a time right now. And I think it's just very important to continue to focus those resources on people that are coming back from, from the prison system, as well as trying to prevent other folks from falling victim to that, gluttonous system that we've obviously seen time and time again is in desperate need of change. So, I appreciate everybody's, time and energy. And again, just keeping it short and sweet to say that, our budget items should reflect our priorities. And I think that now more than ever, we should continue to serve or to fund the folks that are working on the ground in the highly impacted communities to continue to support survivors and folks that we want to keep from being survivors. So thank you.
Thank you.
If Tina Rodriguez isn't here, I'll put her at the end unless she speaks up right now. I'll put her at the end of general comment as well as the rest of the names that I've collected. She says she's on the phone. I hear you, but you don't respond, and she has not told us what her phone number is. So I'll put her at.
Is she 760 area code?
I don't know. She.
It looks like somebody's waiting in the waiting room. That's all right. I mean, we have some limitations. It's much nicer to be in a room where we can see people and know who's waiting. I think
we do have someone on chat asking to make a public comment. It's Tony Hines.
Well,
I don't have that.
We'll have to, once again, let me do this. I think the best way to coordinate now is to please, Tracy, give everyone your email address. You won't go unheard. We're going to, as I said, after those last 3 speakers, we're going to move to the next agenda item, and please get your, yes.
Tino Rodriguez is a 559. You want the rest of people? 559-270. Do you see that in there, Sean?
Unmuted.
Yeah, there you go.
Here it is.
Hi, this is Tina. Can you hear me?
Gotcha.
Got me. Okay. Thank you. I just want to say that as you receive these funds during this time of everything that's going on, not just with the racial injustices, but an increase in not just violence, but the amount of deaths occurring specifically in marginalized populations, I'll say that this is not, to me, it's not a global crisis. It's history repeating itself. What it does offer is an opportunity as these funds come through the streamline to change history and emphasize equity by applying it to organizations that will make a difference in the communities most impacted by social injustice and ready to make a difference with prevention and intervention. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Back to the board now. We're going to close this item 1 and move on down the agenda. Are there any other members of the board that would like to make a remark at this point? Seeing none, I'm going to call on myself and make one brief remark because I think it's important to acknowledge. The governor appointed a new director of the Division of Adult Parole Operations within CDCR. He is familiar to us. He has been on our board before. Guillermo Rosa will be returning to the board in his capacity as the director of parole operations. With that good news, there's a little bad news, and that is that we will be losing Jeff Green, who is also a repeat performer on the board. I think this is your second occasion, and both times you served diligently and were very attentive to our issues. And we know that you're heading off to do great things again, but we wanted to share our appreciation for your time and effort for the board, and wish you the best in whatever comes next. And would you like to say anything, Jeff?
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Chair Penner and board members. It's been an honor to serve on the board over the last 12 months, and I think I did a couple months stint back probably a couple years ago. But I'd also just like to take just a brief moment just to thank the BSCC staff and their dedication and commitment to the board and the BSCC mission. I've always been really impressed with the level of professionalism of the staff. And the BSCC has been one of the top organizations that I've had an opportunity to be associated with throughout my career. So thank you to them. Glad to see Director Rosa will be back on the board. I think he'll be a valuable addition. And with that, I just, again, wish you all the very best. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeff. Best of luck to you.
Thanks.
With that, I now turn to Katie for the Executive Director's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, good morning, members of the board, and to all of the public participants who are here, as well as agree with you, Jeff, the really terrific BSCC staff team. I want to give a few other updates and then to end with a budget update and ask our board member, David Steinhardt, to provide some additional information. But before getting into the budget items, I wanted to give you two quick updates. One is on the jail profile survey. Back in February, the board authorized the modification of the JPS, as we call it for short, to begin collecting information about late night releases from county jails. And I'm pleased to report that our research staff, Casey Warmoth, our research chief, is doing a terrific job on a whole lot of fronts. She's completed a draft of the data elements that we're suggesting be added to the JPS on this topic of late night releases from county jails. We're going to have a public comment period in July. We'll provide information about that on our website, of course. And we anticipate modifications to the survey to be implemented as soon as we can get those done. And we'll provide status information at future board meetings. Today, I just wanted to alert the members of the board and the public to be on the lookout for a public comment opportunity on the jail profile survey. In addition, the board had asked for regular updates about county facilities that are co-locating adult and juveniles in in county facilities, pursuant to federal law, there are all kinds of very strict requirements about sight and sound separation and so on. And our agency is responsible for ensuring those protections are in place. I wanted to give an update about the county of Yolo from our FSO team, which is that the county has implemented their phase 1, which converted a booking unit into an adult booking unit within the juvenile facility. And then in January of this year, there's a plan to do some additional co-location. So staff have approved the request to implement phase 2 after completing several site visits, policy and procedure reviews, and providing technical assistance. So staff have determined that with the implementation of phase 2, the facility will continue to comply with federal and state standards. So what they're going to be doing differently is to repurpose a unit within the juvenile detention facility to be used for adult housing. The youth will be housed in a separate unit with all the assurances in place about sight and sound separation. You asked for regular updates on those changes as they come in, so we wanted to provide that information today. And then we do have a legislative update. We have a table available on the materials. This year, generally speaking, there has not been a lot of legislative activity that touches on the BSCC, but we have provided information on the website about the bills that are out there. I wanted to turn now to the budget update. When the May revise was released in the middle of May, it was in this extraordinary time in history that we're all in, and there was announced that we are anticipating a $54 billion budget shortfall, which is obviously just staggering, and it's an unprecedented challenge. There's great uncertainty in the budget year, and as of today, there are no final decisions on the state budget. So I'd like to summarize the BSCC related changes that the governor recommended in the May revise, and to let you know how we're handling some of our grant related business, given that we don't have a final budget deal yet. In the May revise, the governor recommended the reversion of $18 million in 2019 funding that had been provided for some of the grants that the BSCC administers. And that was a proposed reversion of $3 million, which was a portion of the CalVIP funding, the Violence Intervention and Prevention Grant. And in addition, a total of $15 million was proposed to be reverted from the Youth Reinvestment Grant, $5 million for the Youth Reinvestment Fund, and $10 million for the Tribal Youth Diversion Grant Program. The legislature has so far not agreed to those changes, so we have a certain, we have some uncertainty around how much we'll be able to allocate out for the Youth Reinvestment Grant and the Tribal Youth Diversion Grant. And when you hear later this morning on our agenda, Field Representative Kimberly Bouchard will provide different scenarios to cover the possible situation about what level of funding is ultimately included in the budget. Turning to other changes in the May revise, the governor recommended eliminating the ongoing funding that had been proposed in January of $37 million for the Adult Reentry Grant Program, but that was to be part of what are known as trigger reductions, so that if there is sufficient federal funding that later comes through, that Adult Reentry Grant funding could be restored. In addition, the legislature has not agreed to that, so that ongoing funding is in an uncertain situation. And then finally, on other BSCC budget related items, the governor had proposed eliminating $10 million in May for an indigent defense grant program that would have been housed in the Office of the State Public Defender. The legislature has not agreed with that elimination as well. So I know that is a little bit confusing, but I'm just trying to outline the present uncertainty about grant related funds. And then to turn to an issue that I know is of significant interest in our board and with our public members. The governor in the May revise proposed the realignment of the Division of Juvenile Justice. And this proposal has been the topic of very significant discussion between the governor's office, the legislature, and affected county entities, as well as many, many advocates and advocacy groups. The BSCC portion in May Revise was related to responsibilities to administer grant funding to the counties. But the discussions have gone in a lot of different directions that David Steinhardt knows about because he's been quite involved in those. And David has agreed to provide us a status update about the DJJ proposal. Thanks, David.
Okay, I'm unmuted, right?
Yep.
Go. Well, thank you. And yes, I've been very closely involved in the Division of Juvenile Justice Closure debate, including negotiations with advocacy organizations and the administration on the terms of realignment. Now, this is not my first time around the block on this because I was an advisor to lawmakers back in 2007 when we realigned most of the DJJ population back down to the counties. This announcement in the May Revise did come as a surprise because last year we agreed that the Division of Juvenile Justice would move to the to Health and Human Services, and that was going to take effect just next month. Now that plan is off the table, and the new plan, which is largely budget driven and savings driven, is to close DJJ. And just to make it interesting, the realignment proposal went on a 30-day time clock. So we're supposed to achieve this really kind of difficult project of final DJJ realignment in 30 days and really just 4 days from now. And that has turned out to be a big problem affecting the nature of the debate. So I don't really want to spend a lot of time on this, but it is an issue that's percolating in many places with many of the people who are watching this board meeting. And it's important for the board because BSCC has a role in realignment that we can discuss. And this is also historically important. Just 25 years ago, there were 10,000 juvenile court wards in state-run institutions. And under this proposal now, that would drop to 0, and this would become a population completely under county control. So I would just like to take a few minutes, and I'll keep it short, to discuss 3 elements of the DJJ realignment debate that are critical issues and that also affect the operation of this board. And I'll go through them rather quickly. And when I'm through, I'm sure the probation chiefs who are very deeply involved in this whole debate will want to comment as well. So first, funding. The DJJ population is made up of youth with serious and violent offenses. And so probation and counties are not going to support realignment without funding from the state to handle this much more challenging caseload. And the funding piece has been a critical one. The thing, what's on the table now is a block grant to counties in the range of $220 million per year, funds that would flow from the state to counties to develop the capacity at the local level to handle this more serious caseload. But that funding plan is just in shreds, it's in pieces. And it would package with 2 other grants that BSCC already administers, at least gets the reports on, which are the Juvenile Justice Crime Prevention Act and the Youthful Offender Block Grant. So lawmakers and advocacy organizations looking at the funding proposal, they want guidelines and accountability built into the grant program. And legislators are really tough on this one. Counties, don't want too many strings attached to the funding. But because it can't be worked out in time, the legislative committees are now saying, we can't do this now. And so the plan to do this in the June budget has been taken off the table. And this whole thing, at least we think that, I mean, something could happen in the next 4 days. But it's really looking like DJJ realignment and all of the terms will float till later in the summer. And Katie mentioned the BSCC piece, which is a special grant program. And that would float as well. So a second critical issue that's part of the DJJ realignment discussion is the impact on transfers to adult criminal courts. And this is a really very serious issue, one that advocates have taken extremely seriously and has been negotiated with the governor's office. So we have about 350 juveniles committed each year to DJJ. Nearly all of them have serious and violent offenses that make them eligible for transfer to adult criminal courts and ultimately to state prisons. So if you close DJJ and you don't have viable custody options in place at the county level, then there's a clear and present danger that many, even most of these kids are going to wind up in adult courts and state prisons. And this is a consequence of realignment that nobody wants. So the good news is that the governor has already indicated his approval of statutory controls that will prevent this from taking place. There's an advocacy team and group that's helped the governor look at this and draft language. And I think this is one element of the realignment proposal that really can be achieved. And I want to thank the governor, by the way, and the advocates who've made a lot of progress on this point. The third area of controversy is oversight. So there are big questions around the continuing role of the state in the oversight of DJJ realignment funds, what kinds of facilities are going to be developed at the county level. Legislators and advocacy organizations want coordination and quality controls built into the plan, and counties don't want so many strings attached to realignment funds that they feel straitjacketed by the plan. So we have multiple proposals around oversight, around the kinds of facilities that these more difficult cases would go into, who's going to serve sex offenders, what about mental health cases, and none of this is resolved right now. But it also spills over into questions about BSCC's total role in the future of the juvenile justice system in California. So one of the questions being asked is, how has BSCC performed so far in the oversight of county juvenile justice operations? And there's controversy around that. And the other question that's also sort of in this debate is, where is the best place in state government to center and consolidate the state's total role in the coordination and oversight of a completely realigned juvenile justice system? So there's no concrete plan on this, but it's a point of great controversy and one that is going to have to be worked out over the summer. So I don't want to go deeper into it. There are a lot of other elements here, but it is a time of great change in juvenile justice in California. I have a note here. I said that the California juvenile justice system is on the operating table, and we really don't know how it's going to turn out. The BSCC role is in play. I did talk yesterday with Rachel Rios, the chair of our state advisory group on juvenile justice, and the state advisory group has met and has expressed many of the concerns about oversight and funding and what happens to these kids if they move to county control. And so that group is very concerned and involved in what's happening. So I just wanted to take this opportunity to kind of lay out what's happening, lay out some of the consequences for BSCC, invite comment from the board if you have any, and from the probation chiefs who are, whose work at the county level is hugely affected by what's happening. So I think I'll just stop there. Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could, I think it's important to note, and David, thank you very much for the updates. It is my understanding that these issues still are being negotiated, and there is the possibility that some agreement can come together prior to the end of the budget process. So while understanding the significant areas that remain unresolved, I think it's important to note that it's still being actively negotiated.
David, thank you for those words. You took most of what I wanted to say. I remain very, very concerned about the adult court transfers. We know young people should not be sent into an adult prison system. Anything that would send more kids, young people, into an adult prison system should be taken off the table immediately. I also am equally concerned about oversight. While I've been in so many different juvenile halls throughout the state, there's not a one-size-fits-all approach. I would be very, very excited if this was my kid. Actually, not excited. Let's not use those words. But I would not be upset if this was my kid, knowing that he would be in a Sacramento facility with Chief Seal and the people in the Sacramento Probation Department, because I've toured those facilities and I've talked with hundreds of youth over the years about how they were treated, what the relationships with staff were, et cetera. And I've heard really, really great things from the young people. But obviously, I've heard people coming out of other county juvenile facilities with absolutely awful experiences. And so while DJJ has a lot of problems, I know sending kids to some probation departments will make matters worse, not better. So I'm actually for flexibility and oversight. Flexibility in that if a county board of supervisors wants to do this under HHS or wants to do it under probation, that should be their call, but they should have the flexibility to do that. And oversight in making sure that wherever these young people are sent, that we are making sure that we're following best practices around the country, that we're looking at small group models and close to home models, and making sure that all counties are doing what's in the best interest of kids, not at what's in the best interest of adults.
Thank you, Scott. I think there was a request to hear from Lee Seal and Mike Ortola if you would all have a, there you go, Lee.
Thank you, Linda, and thank you, Scott, for the kind words. You know, we, at least speaking for myself, I was surprised to hear about the proposal. I am a little bit mixed in my reaction. I think would stand ready to make this work here in Sacramento County. I do think that we could build out programming, and you know, when you say close to home, that's really what counties have to offer. We can connect these young adults to services and support systems that are in fact part of their community, and we could be very successful at that. But you know, speaking, I think on behalf of other chiefs out there, I have to say that, you know, this is not necessarily something we asked for. We remain concerned about the resources and how would that work. And, you know, there's a lot to be worked out. So, you know, we're at the table, you know, again, just speaking for myself, if it were something that we could do, I think we would stand ready to at least, you know, if the resources were there, I think we could step into this and make it work and, you know, with some of the parameters. So, you know, let's work together and, you know, see what we can do to create a smaller, better juvenile system that is more responsive to kids and families, more connected to communities. You know, it'll always be one that has to invest in kids. And, you know, this may not be a popular thing to say, but I need to say, this is expensive work. We should not try to do this on the cheap. I don't want to do it on the cheap. I worked for the prison system, and with respect to my friends who were there on this call, you know, I lived through the height of overcrowded in 2007 and 2008 when we stacked people like cordwood into gyms and spent nothing on rehabilitative programs. And no one wants to, the prison system doesn't want to run itself that way. We appreciate the fact that they don't run themselves that way anymore. We don't want to run our facilities that way. Jails don't want to operate that way. So, you know, no matter what, it cannot be done on the cheap. I guess that's my parting thoughts, because we want to do treatment right, and to do it right, you have to have clinicians, and you have to have community groups, and you have to have contracts for you know, organizations that are local to come in and have oversight. And you know, if all those pieces are in place, then I think it's something that we could do well.
Thank you, Lee. Mike, anything?
The only thing I would add is I thought David did a wonderful job of summarizing all the complex issues, and you know, Chief Seal also eloquent as always. You know, presented what many of the concerns the chief probation officers have in taking this on, from the resources to even the timeline. Seems to be a pretty quick timeline. So there's concern, and again, the chief probation officers would take on the task, but the funding needs to be there.
Anybody else from the board wish to comment on this issue? You know, I think it's an incredibly complex issue. I think David indicated, that a movement like this has unintended consequences, which creates, hardship for the very people we're there to serve. But I really must compliment all of you at the table who are, trying to move this agenda item. It's complex. It's deals with our most vulnerable population in the criminal justice system, our youth. And David, having negotiated with you when I was a chief probation officer, I'm super confident that all these issues will be flushed out, and if it can be done, it will, but not without a great deal of attention to the detail that you talked about earlier. And in terms of what the chief probation officers are doing, I think Lee makes an excellent point. It's just that balancing act. We can do it, but it has to be. It's an expensive system for good reason, often. So we look forward to the next meeting where we get an update. We'll learn more in the next 2 weeks for sure. And I'm glad to hear it's still open and out there, and we'll move on.
Madam Chair, I think we have maybe some public comment on this issue. Is it possible to take, I don't think it's much. Maybe we could see if there is public comment on this.
I actually got insider trader information while we were listening, and we have no one in the queue right now.
Okay.
So, but I appreciate you raising it, because that is one of my downfalls. I forget things. Moving now on to someone we'll never forget, Aaron McGuire, legal update, recusals. Unmute.
I'm doing my best, Madam Chair. Thank you very much. Yeah, no big legal update today. I think Ricardo actually covered it in terms of what we're doing with the CESF funding. But because we are awarding some grants today, I did want the board to be mindful of the list of potential awardees. And specifically, just wanted to flag for agenda item D, we were going to ask board members Kumpion and Budnick to recuse themselves when we get to that item, as the Anti-Recidivism Coalition had submitted a proposal for funding. But other than that, those are the only recusals I have flagged at the moment. But again, would ask our board members when we get to those grant items to make sure you take a look at the list of potential awardees, and that if you need to recuse yourself, that you announce ahead of time. Thank you.
Okay. Now on to consent items on the agenda. As you know, these are items that anyone on the board or anyone in the public can pull for discussion. I look to see if there's anyone that wishes to pull an item on the consent agenda. Any public comments on anything on the consent agenda? Hearing none, I look for a motion and a second. And as you know, now that we're in Zoom, I think we have to raise hands for this.
We have to do a roll call vote, Madam Chair.
Right, but we need the motion. We have a motion, I think,
Motion.
from Sheriff Perl. Second.
I'll second.
Okay, and moving to the roll call vote.
Chair Penner?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Groudon?
Aye.
Mr. Gore?
Aye.
Mr. Seal?
Aye.
Mr. Ortola?
Aye.
Mr. Barranco?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Budnick? And we'll move on to Mr. Steinhardt.
Aye.
And Ms. Kumpion.
You know, she was in the waiting room, I saw. Did we lose her?
She's here.
I came back.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm an
But
aye.
we missed you.
Awkward.
That's okay. We're looking for a vote on the consent agenda items staying on the consent being adopted.
Ms. Kumbian?
Oh, sorry, aye.
And
Budnick.
Aye.
motion carries. We'll move on now to the discussion items. Item C, the Facility Standard and Operations 2018-2020 Biannual Inspection Cycle.
Hi, good morning, Madam Chair and board members, members of the public, and also my colleagues. The purpose, I should tell you my name. My name is Allison Ganter. I'm with the Facility Standards and Operations Division here at the BSCC. And the purpose of my report is to share with you how we've modified our inspection process during the shelter-in-place and travel restrictions, and what our upcoming inspection cycle is going to look like. I'll also be requesting your approval of a 6-month extension of the next inspection cycle to account for these modifications and the field time that we've lost during the pandemic. Again, the reason that we're asking for extension is to make up for the time that we've lost due to travel restrictions, and I'll provide details about those activities in a moment. So just for a little bit of background, the current inspection cycle began 2 years ago on July 1st of 2018 and is scheduled to end in a few weeks on June 30th. Statute does require that we inspect all local detention facilities at a minimum once every 2 years. And we're also required to biennially review and revise minimum standards for operation and construction of local detention facilities. So during the shelter in place and with travel restrictions in place, the field representatives have continued to conduct biennial inspections by completing the first step in the inspection process, which can be done remotely. And that's the auditing of facility policy and procedures manuals to review compliance with Title 15, which are the operational minimum standards. Field representatives are also reviewing available documentation and using video technology to interact with facility staff and view capability, view physical plants where capability does exist. And as many people have mentioned, we are looking forward to get back to the field as soon as it is safe to do so. And once we're able to do that, the field representatives will be able to complete the additional steps in the inspection process, which is going on site to review physical plant for compliance with Title 24 regulations, and also reviewing documentation on site and conducting interviews with staff and persons inside local detention facilities to ensure that practices comply with not only with Title 15, but also with the facility operational policies and procedures. So travel restrictions also forced us to postpone the public subject matter work group meetings for the ongoing regulation revision process, and I'll talk about how we'll pick up those activities as soon as we're able to. So we do intend and would love to get our field representatives back out into the field as soon as it is safe to do so. And we did talk a little bit about some of the things that are guiding and driving our return to the field earlier. We are consulting with other agencies that do field work. We anticipate a few things affecting our return. One of them we've talked about is having adequate PPE for BSCC staff. We are working on procuring that material. We're also looking at when statewide travel restrictions are lifted and when local county orders are being lifted, and that's also going to include when a local detention facility is accepting outside visitors. We're also going to be considering assessment of risk and safety of local detention facilities, considering questions such as, is there a current outbreak in the facility? So those are some of the things that are going into the next steps in determining when it is safe to send the field representatives back out into the field. So again, to account for the time that we've not been able to be out in the field, we are asking that the board approve a 6-month extension to our upcoming inspection cycle, which will begin on July 1st of 2020. And this will allow us to do a couple of things. First of all, the next inspection cycle will be the 2020-22 inspection cycle. We would extend that to end on December 31st of 2022, rather than ending on June 30th of 2022. It'll allow us to go and conduct site visits and finish up those inspection activities to those agencies that didn't receive site visits during the time we were sheltered in place. We'll be able to pick up where we left off and complete the adult regulation revisions. We're looking to do that in totality in the next inspection cycle. Again, we're going to be ensuring that our minimum standards are elevated to best practices in accordance with the governor's direction. We'll also be implementing our enhanced inspection process, which we've brought to the board in past meetings, that will require facility administrators to appear before the board when there are instances of non-compliance, and field representatives will be out in the field completing additional activities to provide technical assistance and additional follow-up site visits to facilities. And also in the near future, we will be gathering information about facility compliance with communicable disease policy in light of the global pandemic. We're going to be looking at compliance with the Title 15 regulations related to communicable disease. So our inspection cycle will shift from a fiscal year cycle to a calendar year cycle if this request is approved, beginning with the 2023-2024 inspection cycle. That will begin on January 1st, 2023, and it'll end 2 years later on December 31st, 2024. And I do want to note that although we have had to modify our practices quite a bit, be flexible and responsive during this time, one of the positives has been that we've had regular and oftentimes daily contact with facility administrators and agencies regarding the emergency suspension of standards. We've been able to provide a high volume and high quality technical assistance during this unprecedented time. So it has given us the opportunity, even though we can't physically be in the same place as the agencies that we inspect, we have had regular communication with them. So in closing, staff is recommending that you approve a 6-month extension to the upcoming inspection cycle to account for the time that we weren't able to be in the field during this pandemic. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Allison. Let me say this before we ask for board comments. If you have public comment on this item, I hope you're still in contact with Tracy to get in the queue to address this item. Before we go to the board, Tracy, do we have people in line to discuss this?
I have 2 names. I have Renee Menard and Edward Little. If there are others, either hit me up in the chat or by email.
Okay, please do so while we go to the board for public comment.
I had a question.
Yes.
So for Allison, as the inspection process is adjusting the way you described, is there any plan to look at the suspensions of standards that have been approved by the board for COVID and the mitigation plans that are submitted by counties? How is that integrated into, if at all, or in any special way, into the inspection process?
That's a good question. It really, for now, it's been a separate process. We have been reviewing those mitigation plans as we come in, and our board chair has been reviewing the continued suspension every 15 days. So we're regularly looking at them. And that's actually a really good question. We don't often have this many suspensions of standards at one time. So we will definitely take a closer look at how, when we're able to get out to facilities, what the status of that suspension is, and perhaps how it affected compliance with that standard.
And if I might, David, refresh your memory and any of the board members on this issue, we're taking these suspensions very seriously. In fact, we had a discussion during preparation for this board meeting about how many people were coming back online. And we have no one at this juncture that has asked for additional suspensions of regulations. And we're seeing, as would be expected, counties move forward with opening visitation on, in some instances, and no longer asking for relaxed regulatory control. I know Katie referred to that a little bit in her remarks, but I want to assure you these are not being rubber stamped. And the other thing I'd like to say before we go much further, this is not our preference on how to operate. I think Allison can tell you how important that timeline is to this board, and how we think our ability to be out in the field and moving and inspecting and getting eyes on situations is, you know, one of our greatest obligations to the state as we operate. The COVID situation has certainly created instances where we no longer can get out there, and we're not asking for a suspension, but simply a time lengthening period so we can get those inspections done and then move on to the next cycle. I'd like to say that as the board chair, because you know, every one of us knows how important those inspections are. Norma, I saw you were ready to, yeah.
I thought that was a great presentation, Allison, so thanks for that. But I just wanted to know how many have been done in this time since you started in 2018? Mm-hmm. And I was wondering what percentage and how off that is from like a previous one because of COVID.
So we were, when the shelter in place hit, we were at about 70% complete with our on-site inspections. So we had about 30% of our universe to get done. So do some quick math, that's about 30 juvenile detention facilities and about 100 adult local detention facilities. Some of them are multiple facilities in one system, so it's not like 100 extra site visits, just to point that out. But oftentimes what does happen in our cycle is we are compressed at the end, and we had a lot of other activities in the front end of our inspection cycle, like juvenile regulation revisions and also filling some vacancies. So it is not unusual to be conducting 30% of our inspections in that last quarter of our inspection cycle.
Okay. And then also you said that you're waiting to go back in person. Is it, you said based on visiting, on the visiting standards, is that correct?
So the ability, so because there's a statewide travel restriction, and then there are different county orders restricting travel, and then there may be additional restrictions on an individual facility's willingness to accept outside visitors, not just visits in the regulatory sense. So some agencies are not accepting outside visitors, program providers, educational providers, things like that. So we're going to be looking at all of those things to determine when it's safe for us to go back out.
Okay, and then lastly, if I want to be involved in that process, would I reach out to the field representative of LA County and San Bernardino and Riverside?
Yes, so what we can do is you and I can talk online, or any board member that's interested in doing that, and we'll talk to the assigned field representative and figure out the best way to make it happen. So give me a holler and we'll talk that through.
I will do that. Thanks so much.
Any board member, please. You know, we'll get you plugged in wherever. And I think, Allison, I know you feel this. We have urgency to get back out there, and I think we will push diligently to make sure we're there. Eyes on her, the best way to get this done. And so, understanding that's. Everybody wants that. We've heard remarks earlier in this meeting, and they will not be ignored. We will get back out there and get that done soon. Any other board member? Anybody wishing to make a public comment on this item?
Now I have 3 names.
Okay.
Renee Menard from CJCJ would be first up.
Renee, you're still muted. There you go.
Hello. Good morning again to the BSCC board and staff. I'm Renee Menard with CJCJ, speaking on serious concerns about the BSCC inspections process. While we can understand the BSCC's decision to halt inspections since the governor's shelter-in-place order, this agenda item notes that in the first 3 quarters of the 2-year inspection cycle, only 60% of facilities were inspected. It seems irresponsible to have 40%, nearly half of facility inspections, condensed into the final 4 months of the 2-year period. Last November, media coverage of horrendous and inhumane conditions in Kern County Jail shed light on shortcomings of the BSCC's inspections process. At the BSCC board meeting in February, the board considered limited changes to its inspections process, and after concerns were raised by the public, planned to continue the process with community engagement moving forward. However, it seems that those limited changes will be inspected without further public consideration, and it's unclear how this will move forward based off of the discussion today. Currently, the switch to desk audits only exacerbates these existing concerns about inspections. As you heard from community members today, written policies and procedures frequently do not translate into practice. Families are having difficulty connecting with their loved ones, masks are not being distributed, outdoor time is being cut, youth are spending more than 4 hours in their cells. We urge the BSCC to move forward in significantly revising its inspections process, maintaining timely inspections in the upcoming cycle, and addressing concerns about its willingness to hold counties accountable for the health and safety of people inside of local facilities. Thank you.
Thank you.
Dominique Nong, please.
Good afternoon, or good morning. Am I on?
There you go. Gotcha.
Thank you. Dominique Nong from the Children's Defense Fund, California. I made my comments understanding that agencies and staff are stretched thin and sometimes have to pivot focuses. During this time, all of us are asked to prioritize our responsibilities and to think creatively. But as shared in public comments at the beginning of this meeting, community members continue to hear disturbing issues from the inside. Issues that cannot be learned in the modified inspections proposed, desk audits. We asked the BSCC to think creatively about how to do more than desk audits to find out the experiences of people incarcerated in county facilities, especially regarding facility responses to the COVID pandemic, to then be in a position to work with counties now to help address them, whether through technical assistance or otherwise. Furthermore, regarding future inspections, it was noted that staff will use the enhanced inspection process proposed at the February 13th, 2020 meeting. However, on that date in February, it was made clear that it was an initial proposal and needed at least 5 months to flesh out a new effective process, including incorporation of stakeholder input. This is not the time to delay developing that enhanced inspections process. Situations are more dire now due to COVID and the limited ability of people on the outside, especially juvenile facilities, to understand what's going on. And finally, we support the recommendation of the special review of all detention facilities' current policies regarding the management of communicable diseases. And we hope that review will take into account lessons learned from this pandemic and incorporate not just the stated adjustments of agencies reported, but also input from those incarcerated who benefited or failed to benefit from agency responses. Thank you.
Thank you, Dominique. Tracy?
Is Edward Little?
Yes, I am.
There you go.
To the chair, members, and staff of the BSCC, I want to concur with the comments that have been made by my colleagues, Renee and Dominique. And I would just like to add that the inspection work that is done by the BSCC, in my opinion, is essential work that cannot be delayed or put off or be approached as desk work during this time. We know under normal circumstances, this work is vitally important because we must go inside these facilities and see with our own eyes what's going on and address whatever inequities that are taking place in those facilities. right now during a pandemic, it is vitally important that we get inside these institutions and see what's going on and address whatever challenges that may exist. Because this is not only for the health and safety of the individuals inside, but the staff and the community. We cannot take lightly this responsibility to see what's going on inside these institutions and make sure that everyone is safe and that we are following the guidelines that are set to provide care for individuals under these conditions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Gladstone.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Uh-huh.
Hi, so I'm Elizabeth Gladstone and I'm an attorney at the National Center for Youth Law. I also want to emphasize that these in-person inspections are critical and are emergencies needed as our community members in jail are at risk of contracted COVID. All shelter-in-place orders by the counties and states make exceptions for essential services, and we urge that you see the urgency of in-person inspections as exceptions that need to be made and that you investigate and think creatively about how BSCC's critical oversight function can fit into these exceptions. While I understand some facilities are not allowing outside agencies to come in, the BSCC is not like other outside agencies. The BSCC is an oversight agency and should take its oversight role incredibly seriously. Especially if you are allowing BSCC board members right now to go in to inspect at any time they want. Certainly BSCC employees whose job it is to inspect should be inspecting immediately, especially when the guidelines of how to be in public and interacting with others during COVID is clear. Staying 6 feet apart, having PPE, so we all know how to go into public spaces safely during COVID right now. I also want to urge that your facility inspections include discussions with the youth and family members of those in custody and community input. I also urge that you make these inspections, that you make your findings public as you do these inspections. And lastly, I think it sounded like you are deprioritizing places with largest outbreaks for when you start making your inspections, and these are exactly the facilities that require your greatest attention, and you must take the responsibility as the oversight agency to prioritize the places with the largest outbreaks. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one more name. Let me double check to make sure. Kent Mendoza, and that should be the last one on this topic.
All right.
Hi, sorry for joining late. I'll keep it short. My name is Kent Mendoza. I'm with the Anti-Recidivism Coalition Policy Manager here in Los Angeles. And I guess my main comment will be around how is this board really going to ensure that if in LA County, when the Civilian Oversight Commission subpoenas its own sheriff to show up to provide updates on what is happening in the jails and what he's specifically doing around COVID-19 and response to it in the jails and doesn't show up, that to me is very concerning to a lot of our community members, to a lot of our brothers and sisters who are currently incarcerated in the county jail. You know, it's very disappointing to see that even with a subpoena power, we don't get him to show up there. So how are we expecting him to respond to y'all, to this board, if he's not even doing it to his own county? So I would encourage this board to, you know, I don't know, just figure out its real ways that can ensure that we can, you know, get real updates from our own people that are elected to be transparent and supporting our community members, you know. So, you know, I would love to see that. I don't know how, if he can show up at our own local civilian oversights, I don't know how he's gonna show up here, you know, so it's just concerning. We have a lot of questions and a lot of people are really want to really know what's going on and what he's really doing inside. And I could tell you that from conversations that I've had with people I mentor personally who are currently in the county jail and in many other facilities, there's no real things being put in place. So I would love to see how exactly y'all gonna really ensure that we don't have this, even that when the subpoena happens, that we're still gonna get some type of answers, because it's concerning that, you know, we have our own sheriff not really being transparent to us about our own people. So yeah, that's my brief comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken. I believe we're at the end of the public comment period. There's a couple of things I think need to be said here. And one is, this is a high priority of the governor. If you recall, before COVID, we were working feverishly to expand adult inspections, and that translated also to expanding juvenile inspections. I am confident that this priority of the governors will not go away. We're pushing aggressively to get back out in the field. It is an unfortunate balancing act between staff safety and, you know, our ability to get moving on that. I commit to you that will happen as soon as possible. I can also tell you that it has always been my priority, and staff has, you know, met the benchmarks that we set, that we get the inspections done in the 2-year period. There is no excuse for not having those done. So all of your remarks meaningful, and we believe this is one of our highest priorities. No getting around that. And I appreciate everybody's remarks. Anyone from the board want to say anything further? Chief Seal?
Thank you, Linda. I would just like to add that I did have a brief exchange with our executive director, and you know, we support the BSCC's presence in our juvenile halls even now. We want the oversight to be there. We welcome it, and we stand ready to work with board and staff to make this happen as soon as possible.
Thank you. Thank you. Anybody else from the board?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Katie speaking. I want to be sure a comment was made from some who spoke about wanting public access to our inspection reports. We do routinely post those on our website, and I'm happy to ask Tracy to provide an update as part of what comes after this meeting to help people easily locate where to find our inspection reports on the BSCC website. Those are public.
Thank you. Thank you, Katie. All right. I see no hands raised, and we're requesting approval on this issue. So I need a motion and a second.
I move approval. This is Gordon.
Okay, and a second, please.
Second, Sheriff Gore.
Thank you. Thank you. And Adam, will you do the roll call vote?
Chair Penner?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Groudon?
Aye.
Mr. Gore?
Aye.
Mr. Seal?
Aye.
Mr. Ortola?
Aye.
Mr. Barranco?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Budnick? And Mr. Steinhardt? I think he said aye, but he's muted.
Yeah.
Aye.
And on.
Aye.
Madam Chair, the motion carries with Mr. Budnick not present for the vote.
Yes. Thank you very much, Adam. A motion carries. We're going to move right on to item D, the Youth Reinvestment Grant Funding recommendations. And
Chair Penner?
Yeah.
Sheriff Gore, just a question for Aaron. One of the applicants for this grant that was not recommended to get any of the money. I'm on the board of that organization. Should I recuse myself?
Yes, Sheriff Gore, we'll go ahead and ask you to mute your microphone and turn off your camera, and we'll get in touch with you to come back on after the discussion. And yeah, and as a reminder, pursuant to Government Code Section 1091, we would also ask the board members Budnick and Kumpion to also recuse themselves from this item at this time.
okay, so I think Mr. Budnick's gone. I saw Norma sign off. I see Bill Gore has signed off. And let's see, do I see Kimberly? I thought I saw you earlier. We lost you here.
Here she is.
All right, are we ready?
We are ready.
Okay, fantastic. Well, good afternoon, Madam Chair and board members. I'm Kimberly Bouchard, Field Representative with the Corrections Planning and Grant Programs Division, and I'm here today to present an agenda item that's full of uncertainty, just like the rest of our lives right now. In this case, the uncertainty stems from the May revised proposal to revert $5 million in funding for the Youth Reinvestment Grant. So last July, when we learned that the 2019 Budget Act included this $5 million in new funding for the Youth Reinvestment Grant, I came before you with a request to begin the grant development process. You approved that request and work got underway. We had a tremendous response to the RFP for this grant and are now at a point where the ESC members have completed their rating of the proposals, and I'm prepared today to present the funding recommendations on their behalf. Before I do that, I would like to just take a minute here to acknowledge what an extraordinary group of professionals we had on this ESC. We're lucky at the BSCC that we get to work with so many talented individuals, but this group was truly exceptional. And under the leadership of David Steinhardt, my work was made not only easy, but enjoyable as well. And I'll just pause briefly here to check in with David and see if there's anything you might like to add at this point.
I would like to add some comments, but I think, Kimberly, why don't you go ahead and do your presentation and then I'll say what I have to say after you're done, okay?
Okay, perfect.
Thanks.
All right, so as you read the board report for agenda item D, you likely noticed that our requested action is based on contingencies. Since the state budget is not likely to be enacted until the end of the month, we don't yet know whether the proposed reversions will be included or if perhaps the legislature will take contrary action. To ensure that we're ready to act either way and to get as many new grants in place as funding allows for, the actions we're asking you to consider today are a bit unconventional. To facilitate the discussion around that, I'll be using a PowerPoint presentation to walk us through that. And just one last thing I want to mention before getting into the slides. As you might imagine, the youth advocacy community has been working hard to prevent the reversion of these funds, as they feel strongly that diversion options are more important now than ever. And toward that end, a large number of organizations came together to submit a letter to the legislature in support of full funding for the Youth Reinvestment Grant and the Tribal Youth Diversion Grant. So we've included a copy of that letter in your binders at page 184. And I'm gonna, like I said, I do have a PowerPoint and I am a boomer, not a Zoomer, so please be patient with me.
Nice, Kimberly.
Thank you. Perhaps you might take a minute to look at that letter on page 184 while I queue up the PowerPoint for us here. Oops. Uh-oh. Okay, what do you know? All right, so.
Kimberly, be sure to switch the display settings so we're just seeing your PowerPoint and not your notes.
Hey, thanks, Sean. I would not, uh-oh. I'm having a hard time getting there. There we go.
Right there.
All right, thank you, Sean, for that. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in here. Just as a brief reminder, the purpose of this Youth Reinvestment Grant, of course, is to create diversion options for young people with the idea that we want to prevent as many youth as possible from entering the juvenile justice system, and where we can't do that, to prevent further involvement in that system. All right, and then looking at the legislation, we see that there's a focus on targeting youth who are under the age of 18. So I would take just a moment here to note that There can be some young people who are over 18 who receive services if they were enrolled in a program prior to age 18, or if they are under continuing jurisdiction of the juvenile court. Beyond that, the bill also aims to get services into underserved communities, areas with few or no existing diversion options, and in places where there are high rates of juvenile arrest and high rates of racial and/or ethnic disparities. So then looking at eligible applicants for this grant, these funds were available or are available to nonprofit organizations as well as local government entities. And I'll just note here that of the 103 applications that were rated as part of this process, 97 of them were from community-based organizations and only 6 were from government agencies. The key features, or some of the key features at least, of this grant are that any diversion interventions that are funded need to be trauma-informed, evidence-based, culturally relevant, and developmentally appropriate. The ESC established a $2 million maximum per application for this grant, and also established a grant cycle that runs for 3 years. So looking at beginning those new grants on July 1 and continuing through June 30th of 2023. Okay, with this slide, we start to get into some of the contingencies that I mentioned a minute ago. So looking at a couple of different options for how the funding may go with this grant. So if we look at the total amount of funding that up until the May revise, we believed was going to be available, we would have 13.5 million. And that includes 3 different components. So there's 4.8 million from the 2019 Budget Act. And that's the 5 million that I mentioned earlier, less a little bit of admin cost. And then we also have just under 6 million from unawarded 2018 YRG grants. So you may recall a year ago when we looked at making the first round of awards under this grant, we didn't have enough high-ranking proposals to fully expend all the funds that were available at that time. So this roughly 6 million is just carrying forward as a result of that. And then we also have 2.7 million in relinquished awards from 2018. So back in February, you may recall an item that was presented where we were asking for your approval to take reverted funds from the city of Pico Rivera in the amount of roughly 1 million and to roll them into what we were planning on awarding out as part of this 2019 YRG. You did approve that request, so we're expecting to be able to include that, but you will see that the first action item that we're asking you for today is approval of 2 additional relinquished awards. That includes $1 million from the city of Compton and $734,000 from the city and county of San Francisco. So with all 3 of those cases, it was simply a matter of the jurisdictions, once they got into the process of trying to get their subgrantees and get everything lined up, things just weren't coming together the way that they had envisioned when they put their proposal together. So we have letters from all 3 of those jurisdictions asking to relinquish their funds. And you'll see in your binders that those letters that you haven't seen yet from Compton and San Francisco are included in this packet. All right, so those 3 items taken together get us to the 13.5 million funding level. But then there's also a scenario where we may be looking at reduced funding of roughly 8.7 million. And the 8.7 million is just eliminating the 4.85 that we talked about a minute ago as having been included in the 2019 Budget Act. So as we put this agenda report together, we worked with those two scenarios, the 13.5 million and the 8.7. And this slide here is showing us what the funding categories look like under those two different scenarios. So just as a reminder, the ESC established 3 categories for this grant that are based on the request amount of an applicant. So we have small, medium, and large request amounts. And the small, in this case, is defined as less than $600,000. The medium is defined as from $600,000 up to 1.2 million. And then the large is defined as greater than 1.2 million and up to the maximum of 2 million. So you see with that RFP column, the original allocations per category that the ESC agreed upon, and that's what was included in the RFP. That's what we thought we were going to have to work with at the time the RFP was released. But as the relinquishments came along, we ended up with a possibility for 13.5 million. And so you can see in this table what the spread across the 3 categories would be if we did end up with 13.5 million. And then in the far right column, you also see what the spread by category would be if we end up with 8.7 million. And then on this next slide, we start to see what that would actually get us in terms of funded projects. So if we were to have 13.5 million available, we would be able to fully fund the 6 highest rated small proposals, 4 medium and 2 large. And then we would also be able to partially fund 1 more project in each of those 3 categories. And then looking at the right side there, if we were to have 8.7 million available, we'd be able to fully fund 4 small projects, 3 medium, and 1 large. And again, would be able to partially fund 1 additional project in each of those 3 categories. And I thought I'd just pause briefly here to note that overall, we received 27 small requests that totaled about 13.8 million. We received 51 medium requests totaling just over 53 million. And we received 25 large requests totaling 45.5 million. Now let's go ahead and look at this next slide here, which shows the actual projects that would be able to be funded if we have 13.5 million. So this chart shows the actual request amount as well as the recommended funding amount so that you can see by category who we would be recommending for funding. So the smalls, again, we've got 6 fully funded plus 1 additional for partial funding. The mediums, looking at 4 full funded and 1 partial. And then once we get down to the large, 2 full and 1 partial. Then moving on to the next slide. Here's what that scenario would look like if we had 8.7 million available to us. So again, this is taking the highest ranking proposals in each category and fully funding as many as we can, and then partially funding that final proposal in each category. All right, so now I have put all the requested action items on one slide here for us to look at, because it is a little bit unusual how we've put this together, and we're asking for more than what we usually do in terms of our action request. So I tried to summarize the items that are in your written board report as much as possible and just make it as concisely stated as possible on this slide. So basically what we're asking you for today is to approve all relinquished funds to be awarded, to approve awards to 15 grantees totaling $13.5 million, and then as a contingency, also approving awards to 12 grantees totaling $8.7 million, and then authorizing staff to continue making awards from the rank ordered list if recommended grantees turn out to be ineligible for some reason or for whatever reason cannot accept the award. And I'm also going to lay out one additional request for you. As we just saw, we've laid out a couple different scenarios based on the funding level we most expect to see. But it's also possible that some other level of funding could emerge through the budget negotiation process. And in light of that, in addition to the requested approvals on this slide, we're also recommending that the board take the following additional action. And that would be that in the event of an unanticipated amount of funding becoming available, to authorize staff to fund as many new projects as possible. This would be done in consultation with the ESC chair and by utilizing the rank ordered list to fund small, medium, and large projects proportionate to the original allocation across those categories. All right, and that brings me to the end of the slides for this, so I'm going to stop sharing. All right. So that is the extent of what I have prepared for this item. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Linda?
Yeah, Linda's unmuting.
People like it when I'm muted. I don't understand, but that seems to be a... looking to the board for any comments on this matter. David?
Yeah, so I chaired the YRG round 2 ESC. It was a great ESC, and co-chaired with Mark Varela when he was on the board in round 1 last year. You know, the first thing I want to say is that I was so impressed with the quality of the grant proposals that came in this time. This is a difficult subject, diversion, involving collaborative relationships between CBOs on the one hand and law enforcement and probation and other agencies to come up with the mechanisms for actually diverting kids and then tracking the outcomes so we learn about what works. And you know, I had doubts, are the CBOs going to be able to come in with coherent and really good proposals on this? And they really did. So this is was a sort of a great feeling about the range and quality of applications that were received. At the same time, you've got to lament the fact that with so many good proposals now, under the lesser funding scenario, some of those great proposals are just going to fall off the cliff. And that's just sad. And it was awkward so late in the game when we were down to the final rating process to learn that the funds had been cut the way they were. And really the tragedy, if I can use that word, on the tribal side, to go from 10 million to nothing, I'm not sure what that message is, but I hope the legislature will take a closer look at the 100% defunding of the tribal grants. I know that's next on the agenda, so I'll not say more about that now. We do have multiple scenarios. I support the staff recommendations. I like the flexibility regarding the unknowns. What if a median amount of money is made available? We don't know whether more funds will be put back. but the arrangement, Kimberly, that you propose as a staff recommendation makes a lot of sense. So, I'm going to stop there. I hope that we can come back after all the crises are resolved a little bit more and do the diversion work in the state that's so important to get done here, that these grants are making possible. And I certainly want to thank the staff. They worked hard on this. The ESC, each ESC member in this committee had 30 proposals to rate. 30 is a big number. And so I want to thank our ESC members as well. And the final comment I want to make, this is really the first grant round we've had at BSCC under the new rules that change how ratings occur. No final meeting. Everything is based on the initial score submission. I know the staff is still digesting how that process worked, and I look forward to hearing more about that from the staff in the future. So those are my comments. I'm happy to move the staff proposal or move it after other board comments. And thank you again, Kimberly.
All right, anything else from board members? Any public comment, Tracy?
Yes, we have two. I'm going to call the names because if I've missed you, send me a quick message. Salim Allen, followed by Elizabeth Gladstone. Salim?
Good afternoon, BSCC. Can you hear me?
Gotcha, yes.
Okay. I just wanted to encourage the BSCC. Thank you guys for allowing me the opportunity to speak. I'm a member of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, and I have had prior experience. I was once, a juvenile in Los Padrinos Juvenile Facility, and I just want to encourage the board to vote for this this particular grant as alternatives to incarceration for juveniles, because I would like evidence-based treatment alternatives provided for juveniles, because we need to give our youth every chance to succeed, and our incarceration definitely is not the way. So anything that can give our youth the best opportunity to succeed, I definitely encourage you guys to vote for it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Elizabeth Gladstone.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Gotcha, yes.
All right, thank you all for listening to my public comments. I know I've given a few now. I just think it's appropriate in talking about youth reinvestment grants and the Tribal Diversion Fund to talk about the 58.6 million BJA funds that are supposed to help the communities highest in need to prevent, prepare for, and respond to the coronavirus. Youth in the juvenile justice system make up part of our communities in the highest need. And the survey that I talked about earlier with over 200 respondents across the state show how much youth and families rely specifically on community-based organizations or CBOs for diversion and reentry services to support youth and prevent them from being brought back to juvenile facilities where the chances that they get and spread COVID are highest. So the link between supporting CBO diversion and reentry services and preventing, preparing for, and responding to coronavirus is clear, which makes the BJA funds appropriate to be given to CBOs. From our survey responses, CBOs provide a wide range of services, including mental health, education, mentoring, healing circles, cash stipends, case management, technology, and housing services. And I want to emphasize that CBOs are uniquely positioned to provide these services better than government law enforcement agencies like probation, because CBOs are credible messengers that are members of the youth's own communities, are as diverse as the youth they serve, and share many life experiences with the youth that allow them to assist and serve these youth better than any government agency. Youth and families also trust CBOs more than government agencies, especially as the distrust has been so on display with all the national protests. So allowing services to be provided from CBOs allows services to be provided in a better way. And indeed, it's the very fact that CBOs are not part of law enforcement or government agencies that make them the highest priorities of where BJA funds should go. Importantly, CBOs cost less, and because they serve a majority of youth of color, CBOs are best suited to serve youth and families from a health and development, public safety, economic, and racial justice perspectives. And as was just discussed, CBOs have already sent proposals for why the YRG and tribal diversion grant funds, which show they are willing and able to provide these services. And there's already a process in place in looking at those proposals. So with those grants so uncertain, it is even more critical that the BSCC follow other states that have allocated 100% of BJA funds to be given to community-based organizations.
Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thanks.
Tracy?
That's it.
We're done. Okay, and we're going to go back to the board. Before we do that, I think we have to extend our gratitude to staff. Kimberly, you've done an excellent job. This is complicated, only made more complicated by the budget issues that the state faces. And when we asked the Executive Steering Committee to continue their work, betting on something positive, I don't know that that'll work or not, but our appreciation to all of you. And David, your leadership, as always, went a long way on this one. I don't know. Every time I think about the deficit for the state of California right now, I'm not particularly hopeful about, how things will go, but I appreciate the effort, the tenacity, and really the outcomes that, we can hope for if this should come to fruition. I'd look to anybody else on the board that would like to make a remark. Okay, so here we are at voting time. I'm looking for a motion and a second, please.
Move the staff recommendation.
In a second?
Second.
Agartola, second.
Got lots of seconds. Pick which one you like, Adam. And Adam, would you then do a roll call vote, please?
Chair Penner?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Groudon?
Aye.
Mr. Gore recused himself. Mr. Seal?
Aye.
Mr. Ortola recused himself. Oh, no, Mr. Ortola, sorry.
Aye.
Mr. Barranco?
Aye.
Mr. Mills?
Aye.
Mr. Budnick and Ms. Kumpion recused themselves. And last, Mr. Steinhardt.
Aye.
All right. Madam Chair, the motion carries.
Thank you all. And I don't know how you guys propose to get these people that are missing in action right now back into the room. Usually we have to send somebody out of the room and grab them. So Adam, do you have a scheme on this?
Yeah, I'm going to send a group text right now to all.
Adam, I just texted Scott and Norma. I didn't have a text for Sheriff, so go ahead and text him, please.
Yes.
It's
awesome.
Thank you.
See if people come back to us. There's Norma.
I'm back.
There's Gore. There we go. Scott Budnick, are you out there? Seeing, well, I'm sure he'll show up. So let's go with this. We're going to move on now to item E, the Tribal Youth Diversion Grant Funding Recommendations. And Kimberly, here you go again.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So for those who stepped out, I'm Kimberly Bouchard, Field Representative with the Corrections Planning Grant Programs Division. And like the last agenda item, item E is presented in an environment of uncertainty. Similar to the last item, the uncertainty stems from the May revised proposal to revert $10 million in funding from the Tribal Youth Diversion Grant. We have a little different scenario with this grant than what we just saw with the Youth Reinvestment Grant, so I'd want to clarify. For Tribal Youth Diversion, last year's appropriation of $1.1 million was fully expended, so there are no rollover funds in this case. That means that if the May revised proposal is approved, there will not be any funding at all for new Tribal Youth Diversion grants. So to back up for just a minute, I'll remind everyone that just like the last agenda item, the 2019 Budget Act included new funding for this grant. In this case, it was $10 million. And last July, I presented an agenda item requesting to begin the grant development process. That quickly got underway and we had a robust response to the RFP. So we're now at a point where the ESC members have completed their rating of the proposals, and I'm prepared to present the funding recommendations on their behalf. Before I turn to the slides though, I would like to thank Chief Urtola for his exceptional leadership on this ESC. And I also want to acknowledge and thank the other members of the ESC. We had a great group of individuals who brought true expertise on tribal matters to this effort. Their commitment and heartfelt belief in the work was apparent from start to finish, and it was an honor to work with all of them. I'll check in here with Chief Urtola. Chief, is there anything that you might like to add at this point?
Sure. Thank you, Kimberly. You know, although this was a smaller ESC, you know, the programs are vital to the success of the tribal youth. So I was so impressed with the technical knowledge of the members of the Executive Steering Committee. I learned so much, and truly was a pleasure to work with all of them. And then, of course, a big thank you to Kimberly and your staff, Casey and Elise especially, because again, you guys make it so easy for the chair and the Executive Steering Committees and steering us through all of that. But then lastly, you know, I'm just hopeful that these funds will find their way to these excellent programs, because I was quite impressed with all the proposals and such. And so again, much needed, and hopefully these funds will find their way. Again, thank you, Kimberly.
Thank you, Chief. Okay, so we'll go ahead and move on here. And just like I noted with the previous item, I also want to mention here that the youth advocacy community has been working hard to prevent the reversion of these funds, including the 10 million specifically for tribal youth diversion. So toward that end, again, for those who stepped out, there were a large number of organizations that came together to submit a letter to the legislature in support of full funding for the Youth Reinvestment Grant, as well as the Tribal Youth Diversion Grant. And we've included a copy of that letter in your binders at page 184. So for those who recuse themselves on the last item, you may want to take a look at that letter while I get this short PowerPoint ready for us. All right, let's see if I can do this a second time. Okay. Okay, so okay, does that look right?
Yep.
Yes.
Yay. All right, so let's see here with this. Oh goodness, I'm sorry, it went back to the beginning on me. Pardon me, 1 minute. All right, here we go, tribal youth diversion. So with this tribal grant, we are again looking at funding diversion programs. So in this case, the intent is to provide trauma-informed, community-based, and health-based diversion services, specifically to Indian children who are under 18, who are facing entry to the juvenile justice system or further involvement in the system, and who are experiencing high rates of juvenile arrest, high rates of suicide, high rates of alcohol and substance abuse, and low rates of high school graduation. Some of the key features that we see with this Tribal Youth Diversion Grant include eligibility being limited to federally recognized tribes, and ESC adopted maximum of 1.4 million for any one applicant. And then also this next item is an ESC decision, and that was to equally split all available funding between urban and rural tribes. The ESC did adopt a 60% scoring threshold for this grant, such that to be considered for funding, any applicant would need to receive at least 60% of total available score or points. And then a 3.5-year grant cycle for this one. So looking to begin on July 1 of this year and running through December 31st of 2023. Okay, when we look at the available funding for this grant, what was included in last year's Budget Act was a total of $10 million, and that provides $9.7 million for grants, and then also $300,000 for our BSCC administrative costs. So when we look more closely at the $9.7 million that's for funding new grants, you can see there that the split between urban and rural tribes gives about 4.8 million to each of those two categories. So, and then just a note at the bottom of the slide there that the May revised proposal would eliminate all funding for this program. Okay, so with the 9.7 million, which is the only option that we looked at with these tribal grants, what we see is that we would be able to fully fund one of our two urban applicants. And then because the ESC specified up front that any remaining funds in a given category would automatically roll to the other category, once we fully fund the one urban proposal that met the scoring threshold, we have a full 8.8 million left to fund our rural applicants. And that would allow us to fully fund 7 rural applicants and to partially fund 1 additional. So we'd be looking at a total of 9 funded proposals if the full 10 million were to materialize. And just a quick note here that we did receive a total of 22 applications. 2 of them were from urban tribes and 20 were from rural tribes. So, okay, with this item, I went ahead and put the requested action on a slide again, just so that it's easy to look at. And what we're asking for here is your approval to award to 9 grantees, including 1 partial award, an amount totaling $9.7 million. And then also to extend the authority to staff, as we saw in the last item, to allow us to continue making awards from the rank ordered list if recommended grantees are ineligible or for some reason cannot accept the award. So as we talked about with the last item, we've laid out a couple of options here for you. In the case of this tribal grant, we basically looked at all or nothing funding, but it is possible that some other level of funding could emerge through the budget negotiation process. And as a result of that, we're also requesting on this item that the board take 1 additional action. And this is the language that we're asking for on that would specify in the event an unanticipated amount of funding becomes available, the board's authorizing staff to fund as many new projects as possible. And again, this will be done in consultation with the ESC chair and by utilizing, oh, I copied my slide. So sorry, by utilizing the rank ordered list to fund urban and rural tribes proportionate to the original allocation for those 2 categories. My apologies about the bad slide there. And that is the end of my slides. So I'll go ahead and stop sharing and bring us back here. And unless there are any questions, that concludes what I have prepared for you on this item.
Great, thank you, Kimberly. And Tracy, check in with you to see if we have anybody in the queue.
We have Salim Allen back with us. We'd like to speak on this.
All right, before we go to public comment, I would ask the board, are there any comments on this item? Seeing none, take the public comment now.
Good afternoon, BSCC again. My name is Salim Allen. I'm a member of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition, And I would encourage you guys also to vote in the event that funds do become available, to vote for the tribal, reinvestment grant. Additionally, youth deserve and don't necessarily always need to be incarcerated. There are alternatives to incarceration, and sometimes incarceration can do more harm than good. So I would encourage the board to vote on this particular grant as well, to give our youth as many chances and opportunities to succeed, as opposed to being put in a custodial environment where some bad habits are deeply ingrained and it does more harm than good. So I do hope that the California State Legislature does find the money to be awarded to this particular program, because I do think to go from $10 million to zero, that is a bit abhorrent to me. So those are my thoughts on the matter. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, back to the board. I'm looking for a motion and a second, please.
I'll make a motion to move forward, the item forward.
I thought I saw a second from Chief Mills. We have a motion, a second. Adam, will you take roll call?
Chair Penner?
Aye.
Mr. Green?
Aye.
Mr. Groudon?
Aye.
Mr. Gore?
Aye.
Mr. Seal?
Aye.
Mr. Urtola?
Aye.
Mr. Barranco?
Aye.
Mr. Mills? Aye. Mr. Steinhardt?
Aye.
Ms. Kubiak?
Aye.
And Mr. Budnick? I don't think he's here, but without him, the motion carries, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Moving on now to item F, SB 81 Local Youthful Offender Rehabilitative Facilities Construction Financing Program. And is it you, Michael?
I'm here.
There you are.
All right. I think I'm the last thing standing between public comment and lunch, so I'll try to make my comments brief. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'm Mike Shores. I'm a field representative with the County Facilities Construction Division here at BSCC. Agenda item F seeks board approval for the Monterey County's request for a scope change to its Bill 81 Round 1 construction project. For some background, Monterey County in 2010 received a conditional SB 81 Round 1 award of $35 million. After further consideration and due to a variety of factors, including financial limitations and expiring deadlines for construction, a newly proposed scope was submitted on May 13th of 2020. This time, Monterey County is seeking to construct a new 80-bed detention facility. This new detention facility will renovate and replace the Monterey County Juvenile Hall and reduce their overall detention bed space by 34 beds. Staff recommends the board approve the Monterey County scope change as submitted. Thank you. That concludes my presentation.
You weren't kidding. Thank you. Any comments from the board? Any comments from the public sector?
Yes, we had two. Let's start with Cesar Laura.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good afternoon. Cesar Lara with Milpa, based out of Salinas in Monterey County, and we have concerns over this request. And in the letter written to your board dated May 13, 2020, the Monterey County said Monterey County is proposing to revise scope of works for the new juvenile hall to align with current fiscal and timeline construction without jeopardizing SB 81 funding. I think they have jeopardized these funding. This county has overspent on their construction, and they're not getting everything that they were lining to do, and it's unacceptable for that amount of money to be spent when the new facility is going to be lacking a cafeteria kitchen area, and it's going to be lacking a high security classroom area for those that are in the juvenile hall. Right now in Monterey County, we average around 24 youth in the current juvenile hall, and we have 24 youth in a youth center, which is a post-adjudication facility. And what we're requesting that you take into consideration and request that we lower the bed counts from the requested 80 down to 60, that you use the funds that will be adjusted to get a proper facility for laundry, a proper facility for cafeteria space, and a proper facility for classroom space. And you also look at consolidating the youth center into the new juvenile hall and asking the county to sell the youth center property, to use that revenue to really bring it in line with what is needed in a new facility. SB 81 funds are come once in a while, and the mismanagement of this construction project by Monterey County has really put in jeopardy the youth that are currently in the old juvenile hall that will go into a new juvenile hall that really doesn't meet the standards for the community. So we're requesting that your leadership on this as a board, and that you move forward and ask the county to reduce the beds even more down to 60, that you use that space for the classroom facilities, for the cafeteria facilities, and for the laundry facilities, that after spending these millions of dollars, you're not getting with the new construction. They've really dropped the ball on this, and we're asking this board to take action. Thank you.
Thank you.
And do we have Juan Gomez also?
Yes. Well, good afternoon. Buenas tardes. Juan Gomez. I'm the executive director at MILPA. And we've been in this conversation with the county, with BSCC since 2013, 2014, when they were trying to get a construction facility for 200, then 180, and then we had to fight for them, saying, no, you need way less. We were barely able to get them to 120. We originally had told them, like, you should just go for 60, 80. The youth crime is down. We have so many alternatives to incarceration. We need to do way more. And now, once again, it's considered SB 81 is for youth rehabilitation, and you cannot have a new building, especially considering the best practices, evidence-based principles, and youth development, and not have a kitchen facility, not have on-site laundry for youth, right? Like, we're trying to do youth rehabilitation, not youth incarceration. Our money is it's better if it's adjusted for alternatives to detention, for much needed type of programming built in a way that they could potentially repurpose it in the future. Our medium and low risk offenders should actually be out in the streets, out in community alternatives. Girls should not be in detention. I mean, you can probably count in one hand how many young women are in there. They need to be out immediately. You know, at the end of the day, there's nothing more political in the way you budget and make these allocations. With everything that's happening out in society, I think that there's a decision that the BSCC could actually take a knee and take action, you know, and invest. And, you know, all you're just doing, do the right thing and do better. There's nothing that can justify 80 beds. Thank you.
Thank you. Back to the board. Any discussion, any reaction, any comments? Norma?
Can we do 60 beds? I mean, I know we heard from Mr. Shores talking about 80 beds. And is there a kitchen? Is there a laundry? And what do you think about what the gentleman in the community said about the 60 beds? Thank you.
Michael?
So the laundry services will be provided off-site. So they will be taking the laundry off-site, laundering all of the clothing, bedding, and bringing it back on site. The dining area, they are proposing to use the area inside the housing unit, the common areas, the day use areas as their dining area. They've worked through with multiple phone calls relative to meeting Title 15 and Title 24 standards in that area. So they have space for 80 youth to eat in those common areas. So there won't be a formal dining area. And in regards to the question of whether or not they can go to 60 beds, I think that's Really we take the county's proposal, look at it, evaluate it, make sure they're meeting Title 15, Title 24 standards, and we'll trust the county relative to their recommendation in regards to the number of beds.
Can we just, for the sake of Norma, back up just a little bit on this funding and when it was awarded? Michael, can you talk a bit about that and how proposals come in and it's a grant award? I mean, I don't want to reinvent the wheel here, but they compete for this money and they do it under a particular proposal. I think it's been how many years now?
So Monterey was originally awarded their $35 million back in 2010. So the process for construction really starts at that point. There's a lot of things that have to happen before you break ground and you start to actually build the facility. And that takes a lot of time. Unfortunately, time also will mean cost escalations. And so we see that in a lot of these construction projects, is that from the point that you're awarded the money and you've made your original proposal and scope, the project changes and you have to find additional dollars in order to complete what you originally proposed. And I think that's what Monterey County has run into, is that this de-scoping, if you will, and the reduction of the beds and some of the space is their effort to continue to do in their best faith effort to build a good facility that's better for kids, but fits within their current fiscal limitations. And there's a lot of factors that go into why they're, the cost escalations have occurred.
Not the greatest answer, Norma, but it is, we work really hard once you compete under a particular proposal to stay within that. And then we have found, not just on these long-standing grants, that construction costs have created this environment where they begin to rescope. I think you've seen those on a couple of other agendas. So I don't have great solutions for you, but a slight explanation if that helps you at all. Can't hear you.
Yeah, it seems like this has been going on for quite a while. It's just that it seems like there's a low population. And so when I think the community talks about the 60 beds and the no kitchen, like I can understand why they're saying that, but it sounds like this is something that's already started from a long time ago. And like you were saying, that it's part of a grant. So,
and Michael, maybe you could help us a little here in terms of when did this scope change come to you?
I think we began discussions probably in late April, had a variety of phone calls building up to us receiving the formal request for a scope change on May 13th. So there is a lot of discussion and a lot of thought around this, and the county doesn't necessarily want to reduce to the manner in which they're proposing, but are forced to based on the fiscal limitations.
Yeah, and the only thing I would say, other than I had not this particular grant money, but back when I was building a facility, the county value engineered out the kitchen. Maybe something I personally didn't agree with even as the chief, but it was a debate at a higher level even than mine, and they prevailed. I can't say I always think that's a great idea, but some of this is just pure, unfortunately, they can make the food somewhere else. I don't know if they contract. I don't know what the story is in Monterey, but I have heard that they're in very difficult financial straits. So anything else from any other members? Anything, Norma? I don't mean to cut you off. Sheriff Mills?
Do we make regular contact with them during this fiscal crisis that we're in currently to make sure that they're willing to fulfill their part of the obligation to actually follow through and build? Because I know that Monterey, you're right, is in a very difficult position, as many of us are. So I just wanted to make sure that we're actually contacting them.
I actually raised that issue. We don't, do we know that they're even going to be able to staff occupy, build. We don't have the answer to those questions. We sort of manage this on a scenario by scenario per county, because you're right, down the road we may hear something totally different from Monterey based on what's currently going on. I don't know, do you have any of those answers, Michael?
Well, throughout the construction project, we're in constant communication, whether it's through the field representative or the analyst, where there's a constant back and forth and discussion relative to the progress of the project. One of the requirements to build is that you provide an operational program statement as well as a staffing plan, which is a commitment to use the facility as built and as designed and ultimately created through the original scope. So this effort to sort of reduce the scope, I think it's important to also understand that Monterey County they're not just breaking ground, they're pretty well advanced into the construction project. So this is sort of in midstream for them to make this change, and it's throughout the process and recognizing the fiscal limitations. It's their really only way to complete the project at this point, and the facility is well underway.
Is this I don't know this answer. Is this a replacement facility or an additional facility?
It's actually both. So there is new construction as well as renovation of the old. And so much of the new construction is complete. However, the renovation of some of the old existing buildings is still going on at this point.
Okay. Anybody else? Any other comments? David, do I see you commenting or just?
Me? Me? No, I've just had so many budget calls coming in on realignment that I haven't been able to track the discussion well, and I'm probably on that basis going to have to abstain because it sounds like there are issues, but I apologize.
Understood.
Linda, this is Gordon.
Yes.
What if we don't approve of this? What happens next?
I assume they would go back to the drawing board. Is that accurate, Michael?
Yeah, they would need to, if the agenda item's not approved, they could reconvene and reconsider the proposal and resubmit another scope change.
Linda, this is John Prince.
Yes.
This is John Prince with the Deputy Director of the CFC Division. On that point, I do want to point out that this request for the scope change was actually put forth by the Department of Finance because of the fact that the project is almost complete and they are nearing their 3-year construction period, which is required by the Federal Bonds Act. So therefore, in order to sell the bonds and meet the obligations that the state is required to, they have to reduce the scope. It is part of the BSCC project in order to close out the project so they can sell the bonds. The county is going to continue doing some additional construction items outside of that with their own county funds, but we are required and we're requested from Department of Finance to do this scope change now so that they could put forward a scope change within the State Public Works Board action as well within the next month or two so that they are ready to sell bonds on this project in the fall. If we don't meet this and if it's not approved today, then I'm not sure what Department of Finance's remedies would be at that point. There's going to be obviously some additional costs that would go to the state because of the fact that we wouldn't be able to sell the bonds on that. So then any additional funds that the state has already pledged to the county would have to be made up somehow that wouldn't be able to be extended over the 10 to 15 year bond period. The state would have to find the funds.
Lee, I see you raise your hand, and Norma, I believe you did too. So we have Lee, then Norma.
Thank you, Linda. I just want to weigh in with a perspective here, although I think this may be the first time this kind of thing has come before me. So I also humbly, point out that I may be misunderstanding what our role is in this decision. But I think Norma and others have raised and I'm sorry, some of the advocates we've heard from have raised very legitimate and real concerns about, this kind of capital outlay in a time with, shifting trends. And, it's no secret, we've seen a lot of our populations go down over time. But just my own view is the time to make that decision is earlier than this stage. We're very late in the stage. It appears that they're finishing construction late in the stages. And, you make those kind of go, no-go decisions when you embark on a project. And I just don't know that I would support making that kind of policy call so far into the project. I mean, it sounds to me, and staff can correct me, but it really feels like we're in the goalposts are in sight and this is wrapping up. So I don't know that this is the right time for the board to make that kind of policy decision. I also would humbly suggest that it may not be the board's place to make that kind of decision. I mean, I guess it is, but it seems to me like that's a decision to be made by the local county board of supervisors. I assume that there's a match component or some kind of, there's money that they're putting into the project. I assume, or that there's money that they have put into the project. And so I think these kinds of decisions are made locally, and the time for us to weigh in on whether or not to support these kinds of projects is kind of at the outset of when the legislation passes or when the grant is contemplated or comes before the board. I think that's the right time for us to weigh in as to whether or not we should be doing this.
Thank you.
I agree with Lee 100% on that.
Yeah, you have articulated that better than I could have. I was very worried that they're this deep into the project, and it is the Department of Finance asking us for a decision and a move forward. And I would support what Monterey wants. Norma?
Yeah, thank you for that. I also think, 2010 is a long time to work on this project. I just want to say that it's just a little bit worrisome about the kitchen and the fact that there are less people being incarcerated. And I think that our state is moving toward more different versions of incarceration. And so I think it's great to hear from the community about this. I can see when you said 2010, I was like, whoa, that's a long time ago. But looking forward, I think that a part of me thinks that in a few years, like, will this building be like abandoned or will it turn into something else? But like you said, maybe that's up to Monterey to discuss. But 2010 is a long time ago that this project's been going. But I appreciate hearing from the community about this, and also from Mr. Seal. Thanks so much for that.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, we had a question in the chat about whether our board has a letter from the County Board of Supervisors of Monterey. There is a letter in the materials. If you can scan to this item, you'll see an attachment at page 305 of the board binder. It is not from the Board of Supervisors, it's from the County Resource Management Agency that lays out the prior scope and the proposed scope change. The letter is dated May 13th. I just wanted to point that out.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Katie, for that. And any other comments from the board? Seeing none. Moving towards a vote. I'm looking for a motion in a second.
Dean Groudon, I'll make the motion.
I'll second it, Sheriff Gore.
A second. Adam, will you take the roll call?
Sheriff Penner?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Mr. Groudon?
Aye.
Mr. Gore,
Aye.
Mr. S-
Aye.
Mr. Urtola,
Aye.
Mr. Bronco,
Aye.
Mr. Mills,
Aye.
Mr. Steinhardt,
Abstain.
Ms. Kumpion.
No.
Okay.
Mr. Budnick is not present for the vote. Madam Chair, we have the motion carries.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we're now at the public comment section of the board meeting, wherein if you have anything you'd like to address as we move towards adjournment, please let Tracy know, and we will entertain 2 minutes per person. And Tracy, do we have any?
Yes. So far I have 6. I'm going to read the names. We'll start with Salim Allen, then go to T. Hines, Lanisha Edwards,
You've got mail.
Jaime Guerrero, and Miguel Garcia. So if I don't have you, you guys send me a chat and Brian Goldstein.
Okay. So let's wait another a little bit here, let people get in the queue, and then we will close the queue and begin the comments, if you don't mind.
Yep, that's good. Starting with Salim Allen.
Okay.
Good afternoon again, esteemed members of the BSCC. My name is Salim Allen. I'm a member of the Anti-Recidivism Coalition. I recently spent 2.5 months in the LA County Jail for I was falsely accused of a crime, and I was later exonerated. But my stay there, it was very horrible. The LA County Jail, the officers treat people in custody very, very bad. They talk to them very disrespectfully. They have a very bad attitude towards people in prison, in the county jail. There are no mattresses for people to sleep on. Hygiene items are at a very minimum for indigent inmates. Blankets, you get one blanket and it's very cold in the Wayside North County Correctional Facility. There's very little access to self-help groups or education. They force you to stay when you go out to court in the morning time and you have an early morning court appearance. You have to go to the court tank in the downtown Men's Central jail, and you're forced to wait in that tank with it's a very small area, a large amount of people in there. It's very cramped, uncomfortable, packed in there like sardines. There should be like TVs in there. There's no books or anything. It's just an uncomfortable experience. Additionally, the same thing when you get back on the late bus from the court. They put you in a very small tank that's built for maybe 20 people, and they have 60 or 80 people in their standing room, all packed like sardines. And it's almost a torturous situation. Also, additionally, forcing inmates to bend over at the waist and spread their buttocks is a very demeaning practice. That should be abolished. Also, the phone calls are very expensive in the county jail. And I think that's something that should be looked at. That's all that I have right now. I think there should be books, just more books readily available to people. Also in the LAPD holding tank, Van Nuys, I was in that tank before being transferred to the county jail. There were no books in there, and I thought that was definitely not a very good practice as well. So I would just like to submit those to the board, and you guys really have a tough job to do, but Alex Villanueva needs to be held accountable. The LA County Sheriff, they have a history of treating people poorly in the community and in the jail system, and it's still continuing to this day. Thank you.
Thank you.
T. Hines, are you still with us? Lanisha Edwards?
Yes, I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. Hi, my name is Lanisha Edwards. I am not only a gang interventionist, but I'm an advocate and a survivor of many crimes. I echo the sentiment of the community advocates who have been on this line today. I really deplore you to make sure that that 56 million from the CARE Act goes to community-based organizations. Right now, our communities are facing two pandemics. One is COVID-19, which has hit us like dramatically, and the racial violence and police killings. Unfortunately, gun violence and gang violence has not stopped. As community gang interventionists, we are still on the front line. We are some of the most essential workers. We haven't been provided PPEs either, but we still continue to go out there and put our lives in jeopardy to work with the youth in our communities because we want to have safe communities. It is unfortunate that our community members do not find calling the police as something that makes us feel secure. So we are in a position to where we as gang interventionists and community advocates are not only responding to issues related to gangs, but we're responding to mental health issues, drug addiction, and family issues also. I just want to leave you with understanding that California relies on a network of community-based organizations that provide essential work to justice-involved people, survivors, and communities most impacted by COVID. I really hope that you take into consideration really funding a lot of the initiatives that are coming out of the community, and really during this time of a lot of racial tension and violence, really working with us because we don't want that in our communities either. Thank you.
Thank you.
Jaime Guerrero.
Hello?
There you are.
Hi. Hi. My name is Jamie Guerrero. I'm from Stockton, California. I'm the Stockton Chapter Coordinator for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice and the Executive Director for Kelly's Angels Foundation. And we provide services for children that's been impacted by homicide. Our focus is on prevention and the children. I know with the children being involved or impacted by homicide, that their chances of being incarcerated or possible following into the streets is high. And in fact, if we probably take any kind of statistics or surveys in the CYA or the youth authorities or juvenile system, that we'll see that many children, many of the youth are impacted by violence. I see that, I'm glad I stayed on the call because I was able to see that, you know, like with this, your youth reinvestment grant, I see 13.5 million to go into youth prevention, which is really small compared to the billions of dollars that's going into our corrections, our prisons. I just want to say that we do really need the prevention, and like Lanisha had mentioned, that we are out here helping with the youth, and our feet are in the ground, and we're here trying to make a difference. And the support is greatly needed, and I will end with that. Thank you very much.
Miguel Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I just want to extend my gratitude to, the difficult job that you are all putting into, and, with knowing that, hopefully y'all are coming out with the right decisions with all that's being proposed to you today. But I just kind of want to go back to the DJJ youth realignment and echo board member Steinhardt's concerns with the jurisdiction availability, as well as the possibility of youth being more tried as adults, and whether a youth can be inside a local county area, and whether those county probations could provide those services. As seen by the San Francisco Chronicle, there has been exacerbating cost. I believe in Sacramento Juvenile Hall, it cost about $195,000 in 2011 to house a youth. That rose up to $294,000 in 2018. We've also noted that the BSCC has reported that a 30% decrease in population across all juvenile halls. And in the governor's budget, he noted that there's 11,000 capacity space. With DJJ realignment and the high capacity that program and needs and services that youth are going to be needing when they return home, that cost of care will continue to grow, where we see instances where facilities will possibly pop up and be empty in a few years. In the case for where we currently may see in Monterey. But also, I would just like to end that when thinking about the funds that the BSCC will be entrusted to oversee, they should consider that community-based organizations be prioritized, and that community probation officers and chiefs collaborate with the community in providing alternatives for incarceration. There's a lot of youth who are inside these juvenile probation departments that don't need to be there, and that I think that would help for the youth realignment and allowing probations to address them. Thank you, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Desiree McHenry.
Good afternoon. My name is Desiree McHenry, and I would like to speak on my experience. My son just got back from a placement program in Michigan where he caught COVID. So when the pandemic first hit the scene in maybe January or February, I called up to his facility every single day and checked on him. He said he was fine. They said the staff was fine. I had nothing to worry about. At some point in March, they called and let me know they had their first positive staff member and student. One of those students died from an illegal chokehold because he had COVID, which was already affecting his lungs. Then they illegally placed him in a chokehold, which weakened his lungs and whatever else, and he passed away. At that time, I demanded that my son be tested. They let me know that that wasn't a concern at the moment. They were just concerned with testing the staff. That right there told me that they weren't concerned about my child and nobody else's child. They were just concerned about themselves. So at that time, they told me they didn't have a lot of supplies. I sent my son some of my own personal supplies because I have lupus. I sent him gloves, antibacterial soap to wash his body, and whatever else that he needed. April, something happened, something took place. There was some sort of race riot. They said it was no longer safe for the Southern California kids to be there. They were letting them come home early. So because they were getting on a plane, they were now going to test my son for COVID. They weren't going to test them children yet. They were just going to see whose immune system was strong enough to live and die. But because they were getting on a plane, they decided to test them. That was April 4th. My son came back negative. April 6th, I called every day to make sure he was in quarantine. He was not in quarantine. Him and the rest of the positive boys were put back in the facility with the other children who weren't positive, which means at some point they would affect them, and then everybody would be infected, and then how would you get better? My son's medical needs weren't being met, so then I had to call the health department in Michigan because he has a compromised immune system. He has asthma. So there are 30 strands of COVID. He had one strand. In the middle of the night, he can develop another strand. It could attack his lungs, and my child could die. Instead of telling me the truth, they were BSing me. I was calling every day, asking questions, uncovering stuff, calling them out on their crap, calling everybody in Michigan who I needed to talk to go to that facility to make sure my son's medical needs were being met. They didn't have the resources to quarantine those boys. Instead of just telling me the truth, they just BS me. They didn't have the resources. So you can't meet my child's medical needs. You need to safely find a way to send him back to California. They did. I, at that point, let them know that he cannot be released to me until he is negative. I have lupus and coronavirus will kill me.
Desiree,
You have a
Desiree,
ma'am.
I need you to wind up.
I will. So my point is that those other children got sent home and their parents didn't advocate for them because they were intimidated, they were scared, they didn't have the self-esteem to stick up for their children. So those kids got sent home infected, which then they infected their families and they infected the rest of the community. That's a problem. And then the children weren't being educated while they were in quarantine. And then you send me all this work now, work that he should have been finished months ago. So their education wasn't being met or their medical needs. And that's what bothered me. And it could have killed me.
Okay. Well, thank you for your remarks.
Ed Little.
Good afternoon, Chair and board members. I just want to provide a word of caution, if you will, with regard to funding for building and expanding jails and juvenile detention facilities. In a time where we are moving away from incarceration and moving towards community-based programs, particularly for youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system, I think it's very important that we listen to community advocates when they talk about the concerns in Monterey County. I have worked in jurisdictions where folks have made it a priority to build new juvenile detention facilities where the cost started out at $50 million and ran upwards of $180 million, building something of a Taj Mahal of a juvenile detention facility. And there's a saying in this business that if you build it, they will come. If there is not a justification based on the numbers that we need a juvenile detention facility that has an 80 person bed, there is no reason we should be spending the dollars to build an 80 person bed facility, particularly when we are trying to transition youth out of the system. If it doesn't require that, we should not support that. At a time when the state budget is challenged and we are looking at an extreme deficit, we have to be very, very careful about how we allocate those resources. And I just want to provide you that insight and perspective as we make decisions like this going forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, two more people. Kent Mendoza is up.
Hi, board. Thank you again for giving me this chance to talk again. I try to keep it short because I'll drop another call. But yeah, I just wanted to encourage the board to continue to try to be bold at making decisions moving forward. Just to listening to the conversation about this whole contract and this building a new jail and this, I feel like there's opportunity now to really move away from that types of projects and entanglement of contracts with certain types of entities. And just the point is that we can do better. The community is capable of doing exactly what the system has been doing and failing and doing. And just wanted to encourage you all to just think about bolder ways to really do things and make decisions. You guys are supposed to be, I believe, a body that the community, like myself, advocates, that are actually concerned members of our communities and really understand what really is happening at the local level, inside the jails, outside, everything, and the safety of our members. And we just want to make sure that we're able to have, as much support as possible to be able to, be able to have safety for people inside, and I think this body should be able to provide resources for us. I should be able to come here and you guys should be like an entity that's a resource support for people in the local level, and there's a lot of things that we need that maybe you guys could get that we can't. So I just want to encourage y'all to figure out more ways to really be a body that's effective at providing more, support for the local people that are concerned, and also take our comments and what we say serious. Don't just write it down, but actually implement it and your meetings when you're talking about certain things. A lot of things, a lot of times what the public says can be looked at as something so simple and basic, but it's actually, sometimes there are effective ideas that come out of the public and, just take us more serious. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I misspoke. Now we have two more. Sorry, you guys. Brian Goldstein is up.
Good afternoon, Brian Goldstein with the Center on Juvenile and Criminal Justice. Want to speak briefly on the Monterey County Juvenile Hall item, even though the board has already voted on it. I want to echo the comments that were raised by Milpa. First, to be clear, the Board of State and Community Corrections regularly changes the scope of facilities throughout the process. It is a regular action that the board takes. That's why you all had the opportunity to vote on it today. This is the second time that Monterey County has come before the board to ask for a scope change for this project. It reflects a trend statewide with SB 81 projects, given record drops in youth crime and budget deficits. Monterey County's proposal, it was overbuilt years ago when it first received funding. MILPA's advocacy and programs, they are responsible for the facility scope going down. I asked if the Board of Supervisors in Monterey County submitted something to the board, because that would at least partially reflect what the community in Monterey County wants. Seeing that there isn't a letter from the Board of Supervisors, I don't think it reflects what the community in Monterey County wants. I hope that the board instead would listen to MILPA's recommendations given their outstanding leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we have Lanesha Edwards.
I haven't spoken. I'm Tony Hines.
We called you earlier. Sorry. Yeah, we skipped over because we heard you. We called on you. We'll get to you next then. Lanesha, you're muted.
This is Gordon. This is Gordon. Hasn't she already spoken?
Yes, she has.
Yeah, I thought she did too. So let's do the last one I see there that.
Okay, sorry. Yeah.
Hi.
Yeah.
My name is Tony Hines. I'm a chapter coordinator for Crime Survivors of Safety and Justice. I'd like to make public comment about funds to be distributed to community-based organizations who are on the front line supporting members affected by COVID-19 and social injustice. I live in the San Francisco community where I witnessed the effects of a lack of funding needed to support people most in need. My community is plagued by years of neglect, inadequate housing, education, and healthy food. If not for the community-based organizations in my community, many who operate on shoestring budgets, there'll be hardly any resources in my community. The BSCC is duty-bound to ensure CBOs receive adequate funding. Thank you so much. Have a great day. This is Tony Hines from Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. Thank you.
Thank you. Tracy? Okay, it looks like we have come to the end of the meeting. Thank you for all of your public comments. I assure you we've taken note and listened and appreciate your time and effort. To the board members, thank you all very much. We have a scheduled meeting for July 9th.
That's right, Madam Chair. We are anticipating a need for a meeting, and then the next meeting on calendar is in September. I believe we had posted our earlier plan to have that meeting in Orange County. Madam Chair and the staff have conferred and given the anticipated budget reductions. We are anticipating not traveling to Orange County for that meeting. If we are able to hold the meeting in person in Sacramento, that will be the plan in our BSCC offices. And there may be a need to have a hybrid Zoom plus Sacramento location. So I wanted to provide those schedule updates.
Okay, all right. Thank you all. And once again, goodbye, Jeff, and thank you very much. We'll see you all soon.
Thanks a lot.